Sponsors are already disappointed. All right. And we are on the air and we are live from the internet, people. And we are here for the latest episode of CoCo Talk. This is CoCo Talk, lucky number 13. And every week I have the pleasure of being surrounded by not only brains but beauty too. There's more mental capacity here than a think tank at IBM. We've got the lovely and talented Mark Overholzer. We've got Nick Morentis from Down Under. We've got the very gorgeous and voluptuous David Ladd with us. The very svelte and sexy Curtis Boyle's with us. The formidable John Strong is here. Glenn Hewlett and Bill Noble. We are all here, and we're here to talk about one of our favorite things, the Tandy color computer. And we're going to focus on a lot of community discussions that have gone on this week. And so probably the leading story, once we get to it, we might not lead with it, but the first story will be Jim Gerrie's latest contribution of
cornucopia.
All kinds of latest things he's done for the MC10. Now, I am seeing on my screen right now that I'm getting dropped frames. My actual streaming software is telling me that I'm dropping frames. Is my stream acting funky right now?
Not on Skype.
My
Let me check the
stream
YouTube
might be
version.
acting funky. All right, I'm probably going to have to pause this stream for 1 second and pick this up again because, I don't know. My software is telling me that I'm dropping frames, and I don't know if the stream is buffering or not. Or
Looks
if it's
fine on
working. Hey,
YouTube.
Steve Bjork is here. Hey, Steve Bjork, very nice of you to join us again. Glad to have you. All right. Well, if it continues to tell me I'm dropping frames, I might just need to stop and restart the stream.
I'll kill my video too, and we'll see if that helps your bandwidth.
Okay. I don't know. But yeah. So this week we have, it's going to be just a loose and casual discussion about all kinds of stuff that's happened this week. There's not been a bunch of hot topics. There has not been any super duper burning discussions. There hasn't been any too many big debates or anything else. There's not a lot of new news this week, but there's always something to talk about when we're going to talk about the CoCo. There is ongoing discussion about MAME and compilers and building MAME for the Mac and building MAME for the PC and some of the ongoing I guess you can call them glitches or features as we get closer to the latest release of MAME. At the end of this month, it'll be MAME .186. We're discovering little things that need to be tweaked. There's a bunch of new features coming out on this latest release of MAME, and so they're literally being addressed, and bugs are being squashed as we go. So I know we've been talking about MAME a lot lately, so I didn't want to continue to beat the MAME horse. But we will probably have a demonstration by Bill Noble today as well, showing how you can make MAME for the Mac OS. And when we talk about our building, is that the right term, Bill? Building MAME?
Yeah, building would be the best term.
Building. All right, because compiling is not completely accurate. So you're going to build a MAME binary that runs on the Mac, right? So you're going to show us some of that. For the Mac people, right? So we will probably still touch on MAME a little bit. I know the emulator discussion is kind of a hot topic sometimes because it's hard to mention one emulator without pissing off somebody else. So we'll see.
It's kind of like Nitrous 9 versus RS-DOS.
Yeah. So before we get into talking about some of Jim Gerrie's stuff, let's just go around the room here. Anybody here have anything they want to talk about as far as what they've done this week as projects you've worked on? Maybe something you bought at eBay or a book you read or anything like that? Anything you want to share with us?
I got a manual for Dungeons of Daggeroth cartridge.
Oh, I saw that, Mark. I saw that.
So
you got the manual.
Got the manual.
Excellent. And you don't have a cartridge yet?
Not yet.
Okay, but you do have access to the game, right? You're playing a digital copy, I'm assuming?
Yeah. I could probably get one on my CoCo STC too. So.
Yeah.
And Mark, you're aware of the PC port as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, we do have Steve Bjork here. I don't know if he's still here. He may have fallen asleep already. But, of course, Steve Bjork has made hundreds of incredibly amazing color computer games. But we definitely have to say that Dungeons of Daggeroth, if there is a top 10 of CoCo games, it's up there. And it's in the top 1 to 2 of those games. Just my opinion. Hey, Ed Snyder is here. What's going on? Ed Snyder. Ed, we need to get you on Skype, man, because we were going to talk about your latest video you posted.
Yes.
As far as playing media files. Ed, we got to get you on Skype, dude. Come on. We need to hear from you firsthand and not via chat, because Ed's making all kinds of cool stuff. So Mark got the Dungeons of Daggerath manual. That's kind of cool. Like there's things you want to have, right? So I wanted to have the comic book that came with Ganabuana, because I remember having that as a kid. So I got that on eBay. That's kind of a prized possession tool, because that's just a cool little piece. It's a cool production, you know. But even though we can get most of the software nowadays digitally, if you're a true believer and a true CoCo nut, you're always going to want to have that tangible, collectible thing just to have. Yeah, I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but it's looking like I'm getting a lot of buffering right now. Is it just me?
It might be just you. I'm watching the live stream here, and it doesn't seem to be stuttering or anything.
No issues for you guys? Okay, that's good.
Aside from hearing you talk, but that's always a problem. So
yeah. Who else has got something to happen this week they want to share with us?
I don't know. Maybe a slight change in my PS2 mouse adapter.
Let's hear it.
I changed the design from using a pulse width modulation to using a DAC, which Jim Brain suggested a specific chip, and I tried it out, and it seems to be working out pretty well. So, still got more testing to do once I get the PCBs in, but it's looking extremely promising.
Very cool, very cool. I'm going to stop the stream for just a second here, because I continue to get these messages. I'm going to lower my resolution, so bear with me 1 second. If you guys are watching, don't. All right, well, we are back. All right, so I think we're back. Okay, Ruti Kazuti says, I'm a Strow nut. Thanks, Ruti Kazuti. Glad to have you here. Michael Brandt is here. David Ladd was talking about his latest update on a project he's working on, which is a PS2 mouse adapter.
Yes.
Which will allow you to plug in a slightly more modern mouse to a CoCo.
Yep. So far I've tested it with the original Radio Shack high-res joystick interface and the software-based high-res routines that are in Color Max Deluxe. So far it seems to be working. So certainly better than trying to use a joystick as a mouse.
Right. Yeah, not much new for me on hardware or software acquisitions this week, at least on the retro side.
Yeah, I haven't done too much work on the CoCo. I've been busy with work, but I mean, I can mention a couple minor things, like Wayne Campbell, I guess, got most of the bugs out of his Basic 9 Run B decompiler. So now he's just working on getting the type statements to work. I'm kind of trying to help him a little bit in the background when I get time. Your basic video on the Get Quick stuff was quite cool. Nice explanation of masking and stuff. Probably better than most I've seen for beginners.
Okay, thank you.
And we went back and forth on a couple of minor little optimization things and stuff.
And then I'm done. Then like 5 more ideas pop into my head. And then usually, in Curtis, you and I, we're like, everything that you end up putting as a comment, I'm like, dude, I was already thinking about that. I was already thinking about that as the video is uploading. I should have talked about this, or I should have done that. And I guess that's kind of, and there's enough of you here who actually make real software you could probably chime in on. That's got to be what it's like when you make software, that you're kind of never done, never completely satisfied, and always thinking about something else you could have, should have done, or want to do. I know with me, it just seems like it can be almost become an obsession.
Yes.
So I have some heavyweight game developers here in the call that could definitely chime in more than me. But I think the process of working on something and then always wanting to improve it is, I guess, part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, having Steven in the chat room. I mean, he probably knows better than anybody that, especially back in the day, you were programming based on not doing the absolute most optimized code you could, but you were based on deadlines. You had to get your project out by a certain delivery date. And I'm sure he, as well as everybody else, like Nick and everybody else too, that has released like games and stuff, or even just professional software, that you aren't satisfied. You wish you had more time. You could have done this, or you discover a technique a year down the road and go, "Oh, geez, I could have used that in this other program I did," but you almost never get back to it.
Okay, Barry Marks just joined us. He said, "Basic is programming. I was a system programmer for 35 years in assembly, COBOL, C, and Basic for hobby stuff. It's all programming." Okay, thanks, Barry. All right, so I think the process of writing software and thinking up logic and doing that, I think that process is probably there's a commonality to that process of the mental creation and the physical typing in of the programs. So I guess that part's similar. It's just the languages and what the languages allow you to do is what makes the differences.
Yeah. And the original Basic, as that one documentary that did the history of the early part, I mean, it was created at a university basically to encourage non-computer science students to try to learn a bit of programming. And they tried to make it as easy as possible, and it was quite successful. They got in some, I can't remember what it was, like people taking commerce or something like that, like not computer related at all. And they actually got functioning programs out of that very first year. They actually created Basic, and that had never been done before. Basically, you needed to be an engineer to figure out how to program in COBOL, Fortran, assembly, etc.
Fortran, basically, Basic replaced Fortran, the whole compile process and all that. So.
Yeah, and also never being satisfied when projects are done. That goes for both hardware too. So.
Yeah.
You always have
Steve
something you
Bjork
want to
is saying
upgrade.
he's possibly able to join the Skype call, so that'd be cool. The only problem is you would have to be a contact of mine for me to do it. So, and then I can add you in. I don't know. Skype is weird. You can't add somebody to an existing call if you're not friends with them. And so, Bill.
Yes.
What you been working on this week, sir?
Oh, this week I've just been actually getting the entire build environment working in MAME again. Since I wasn't able to run any of the OS9 images, I had to actually rebuild everything with Tim's latest update. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of information sharing going on about MAME right now. I think there's been a lot of misunderstandings and miscommunications about how MAME works. Okay, let's see if we can get Mr. Bjork in the call here. How do I add to this call right now? How do I add? Plus, hold on 1 second. I'm trying to add you, Mr. Bjork. Okay, you've been added. Let's see if we can get him in the call right now. All right, I've added him to the group. Let's see if we can get him in. So yeah, I think a lot of great information sharing has been happening recently because many people are mentioning that they're still referring to MAME as mess, and the last time I used mess, I had this problem, I had that problem, and so for better or for worse, a lot of updated information is reaching the surface.
Yeah, I'd also like to mention that there are people that have different torn ideas with different emulators, and from my opinion, you're going to have problems with any emulator. So technically, you can't just blame one or another. You just kind of have to go with the flow.
Right. And not only is there the nuances of using MAME when it's fully assembled and you're running the fat binary when it's done, there's a process to get MAME assembled in the first place sometimes, depending on the operating system you run, or if you want to create a custom strain of it and things like that. So, Steve Bjork, are you with us?
I'm trying to get on. I think my headphone's not set.
Ah, well, we hear you. Welcome.
Okay.
Yeah, welcome, Steve. Long time no see.
Welcome.
Yes.
The star power has just reached stellar status at this point.
Let's not go in that direction, okay?
This has gone from a third-rate show to top-tier entertainment.
We're number one. We're number one.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get a chance to... okay, Mike Brandt said the feed stopped. I'm not sure about that. You got to love technology, especially live Skyping, right? Yeah, hopefully we'll get a chance to take a look at that, Bill. And you can share some of that wisdom with us. As David was saying, no emulator is perfect.
That's true.
Absolutely true.
Yeah, and you also got to balance the if you want an emulator that can cover every single base, it's going to be more complex to use. So if you want something easy to use, you generally can't put in everything but the kitchen sink. So depending on what your focus is, one emulator may definitely be better tuned for your needs than somebody else's.
Apparently VCC is going to have an update very soon.
Yeah, I saw
James
that. James and somebody else have been working on some bug fixes, etc.
Yeah, hopefully between James and what was that, Walter? Walter was
Yes.
looking at the 6309 instructions part, so hopefully we might get some of the 6309 issues fixed as well with VCC.
If VCC could get a couple of things, tweaked and have better artifacting on there, it would be a great kind of one-stop shop for most things. I believe it handles most of our everyday needs for CoCo stuff.
Yep.
I think there's even talk of adding a debugger as well later on.
That would be cool.
Yes,
And obviously
it
the bigger picture is to make it cross-platform as well, so it runs on Mac and everything else.
Yeah, it does run with the wine wrapper on Mac right now, though it's less stable than its straight Windows counterpart.
Yeah, I love how people will sit here and say, well, yeah, VCC and wine and want to praise that, which is really high-tech duct tape. And you'll praise VCC wrapped in wine, but want to trash MAME that actually runs natively. So.
Now, Steve, were you involved with any of the emulators?
No, except for VCC. The guy wanted to call it Bjork.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
I told him no way. I took it as an honor, but I wanted him to bring it out there as his own product, and like that. As a favor to him, the reason why it's on the CoCo 4 site, it was just a mirror so that I could take some of the load off of his website.
Okay, that's maybe why I thought you were tied in the development of it, because I do remember you were hosting it on your site.
Yeah. No. It would have been more connected to me at one time, but I prefer a little bit of anonymity once in a while.
So do you play with the emulators much at all, or are you too busy with real life stuff?
I've been pretty busy with real life stuff. I've just recently started an LLC corporation to roll all of my DBAs under one thing. One corporation.
Now, is this stuff you can
Nice.
publicly talk about, or you want to promote it all on the show, or?
Yeah, maybe later. Let's get the meat of the show out of the way, and then we can do that type of stuff.
Yeah, that sounds good. So we'll start off with our big lead, unless somebody else had something they wanted to say. I was going to say we can jump into our big lead story this week, where we'll show off some of Jim Gerrie's latest offerings.
No, I think it's a good idea. He's got a ton of stuff as usual.
Yes, he does have a ton. Let me see if I can switch screens here right now. Now, I also have a link to this. I have a link to this in the description of this video. So if anybody is not familiar with Jim Gerrie and Jim Gerrie's website and his YouTube channel, I've got a link to it. I'm just going to resize this window where we can see it a little bit better. So here's Jim Gerrie's YouTube channel, which, by the way, I'll just quickly copy and paste this into the to the text chat as well. All right. So if you're not familiar with Jim Gerrie, very prolific programmer, I believe Canadian as well.
I'm not even sure.
I want to say he's Canadian, and we won't hold that against him. And yeah, but Jim has been he cranks out, I don't know, a program an hour, it feels like. Does a ton of stuff for the MC10, and then a lot of his stuff will end up getting ported to the CoCo as well. He's been mentioned on the CoCo Crew Podcast for the past 2 years, almost basically since episode 0. Jim does a lot of phenomenal work, and a lot of what he does is he'll port other programs from other retro systems. And so it might be an obscure program that appeared on a ZX Spectrum or something else, and then we get the MC10 version. If you're not familiar with the MC10, it is the kid brother of the CoCo with an even crappier keyboard and more hardware restrictions on it. And so the fact that he can do all this stuff, and mostly in BASIC too, is incredibly impressive, and extremely prolific guy.
Agreed.
And so one of his more recent updates was a cool little star map demo, which I'll go ahead and put up here now. And if I recall from reading some of the descriptions, the system this thing came from was from the original TRS-80, which would have been in black and white. And so he has actually added color to that. And this is a program that will show you constellations and things like that. Yeah. James Ross says that Jim is a programming machine on that MC10. Yeah, I could not agree more. And
it's even more impressive because he has to type them all in using that keyboard, unless he's using the emulator all the time.
Well, what we're watching now, at least for the video, it looks like the video is running in an emulator. But I remember programs like this. I remember for me as a kid, these were not terribly interesting, but there were some of these constellation programs that were out there. I remember a biorhythms program for the CoCo. Anybody remember that one?
There was a few of them, actually.
Yeah.
A couple commercial ones, and then a few in the magazines as well.
And if I'm not mistaken, there might have even been a hurricane tracker at one time. And being in Florida, that was kind of interesting for us. But yeah, this will display a star map. This one you can then choose to view a particular constellation. And you know, the MC10, due to the limited RAM it had, did not have access to most of the higher resolution graphics modes. So most of the stuff here is like your semi-graphics 4, like your normal reset screens here. But you know, this was originally done in monochrome on the TRS-80, so the fact that he's actually broken it into color is kind of cool too. Showing the moon's phase. Look at the resolution on that moon too. So yeah, cool little program. There's a few more in here. I'll skip through some of them here. Some of his stuff has music, so you'll hear the music from his videos now. Did I just fast forward through Star Map again? Okay. Monster Maze. This one I thought was kind of interesting. I'm not sure that there's a way out of this maze, but it generated a really cool maze. And then you can kind of move around and navigate this maze. So right now we're watching it just kind of create the maze. And one of these days I'm going to actually look at his code and see how he did this, because this is all in BASIC. And now we have a little inverted star that we can use to run around. Now I'm not sure if this is being done manually or if the software is trying to find its way out of the maze. If this is the software trying to figure out the maze, it's actually really impressive. Now, was any of this the inspiration for Megabug by any chance? All we need now is "Wee gotcha." That's really cool, though. What else do we have in here now? This one is called Deflect. Oh yeah, this one was kind of cool too. I was watching this one. I was trying to figure out what it's doing, and you kind of figure it out here. Now, this is all text-based graphics. But it's looking like you're bouncing this ball around, and if it hits the percent sign, it'll bounce straight. But if it hits a slash, it bounces in an angle. So it's kind of like this to be like a modern kind of puzzle game you'd find on your smartphone or something, where you got to move things around and cause something to land in the right spot.
Kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Reactoid game cartridge or Aardvark Software's Tube Frenzy, where you set these deflectors.
So they're just cute little games too. And they've got to all fit, and I'm assuming a lot of these are fitting in the 4K. Okay, Arabian Rhapsody. I have even no idea what this is. But he's got great music to his videos here too. You are the Alibaba collecting treasure from a secret cave. This is the vicious thief who's trying to stop you. Oh, this almost looks like a Sudoku type game here.
Yeah, some of his games require the 16K RAM expansion cartridge, which the MC10 had. And he's also got a couple of the games lately. He's actually had a couple of machine language subroutines using the 6803, so he's got some more advanced stuff now too.
Okay, I'm having a hard time following this right now, but let's see what happens here. I guess every time you move, the bad guy moves too, and this is... I'm not sure I'm following the logic here. As you gobble up these numbers, you're getting points? Or do you have to... I don't know. I'm not following that one. And I don't like to read, so we'll move on. But the amount of programs this guy has cranked out is absolutely... This reminds me of games I've made as a kid, too. The little... Just moving the little tiny pixel around. Yeah. Very cool.
He had one racing game. It was based on an old arcade game. I think that's one had some assembly language routines to scroll the screen around. They looked pretty good, especially for a low-res game. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Yeah. That was the fastest way to scroll, was to scroll the text screen. You know, so I did similar things like that too. It was just you print and the screen scrolls up. So if you want to make a driving game that scrolls from the bottom to the top, it was easy to do. Oh, happy Mother's Day. Oh, I didn't know you could reuse the Happy Birthday song for Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, Cross Rally's the one I'm thinking of.
Okay, Cross Rally. Very cute. I probably should be reading the descriptions on these, but let's see. Okay, Galaxy Adventure. He's done a lot of text adventure type stuff too. You are the captain of the Starship Enterprise and awoke moments ago to find an empty ship. You want instructions? Oh, this will save games too. Okay, yeah, very text adventure based. There was one he did a while back that was like a 10-line based text adventure too. It was like really short. What are we looking at here? Soul Chess.
Hey,
Solitaire Chess?
Yeah, your background music is overpowering your voice.
Ah, okay. All right. We will take a break from this for just a minute. Yeah, maybe the screen, maybe sharing the audio with you guys was not that necessary. Let me see if I can fix that. Okay, I just cut off the system sound. All right. Yeah, this almost looks like a kind of a cool battleship thing, but there's just so many of these, right? And it's almost impossible to keep up with what Jim Gerrie's doing on the MC10 front. It's just like, it feels like he's cranking out a program a day. It's definitely an inspiration to anybody who wants to make some software. That was cool stuff. Very cool stuff. Hey, Nick, anything you can update us up on Gunstar right now?
Not a lot. I am working on another routine. I won't say what it is just yet, but it's still incomplete. So you'll hear about it the next blog, I guess.
Okay.
What I do have, we were showing programs and stuff. I was just wondering, should I show an old project. You've already seen this, Steve, but an old game project that I had started but didn't complete. Remember my game Portal?
Vaguely.
Yeah, I just thought I might just show that to show something that I was working on but never finished.
Sure.
I can share a screen so I can run it. I don't know how that'll share across, but this is a game I wrote probably 10 years, began writing about 10 years ago. Went so far, and then I just changed my mind, as I often do, and never finished it. So I'll just try and share the screen, or share the window at least, so it doesn't take up too many resources.
No worries.
Okay, now is that working? Can you see that window?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now I think I've shown this to you. It should be running the best emulator, BCC. Might as well throw that in. It might inspire us for a discussion later on. So I'll just run. What do I call it? It's been so long. Oh yeah, Portal. So Portal is a game which was sort of based on an arcade game. What was that game that was in the arcades where you're going down a tunnel, firing down into the tunnel? There was an arcade game this was inspired of.
Was it Tunnel Hunt?
No.
Is it the Atari one where you spun around in circles and shot down?
Yeah, it's
Tempest.
Tempest, yes. So it's sort of like a Tempest. It was to be a Tempest type game. The idea is that you have this like a dimension gate whereby you open up a hole in space where you can sort of transport through. But unfortunately, when you open the gate, all these weird monsters are starting to come out, or weird shapes. So you basically are in control of a gun that shoots at all these aliens coming out of this tunnel as you're moving through the tunnel. So it should, there we are. So that's the game there. And this is like your control panel. And there's a round ring. Now that ring there, can you see my mouse on there?
Yeah, I can see your mouse.
Okay. These round objects here are basically like energy spheres. So when you fire, you send a bolt of energy down into the tunnel. The tunnel, of course, being represented by those stars coming out. At the moment, I can actually, in this test program, I could actually move the stars around, so I can make it reverse as it's doing now. I can
neat.
Bring it back, so we're traveling in and out of the tunnel. We can spin it as well, so we're sort of doing a spin. I can spin the other way. So that was where I actually ended up. I didn't really finish beyond this. Now the round ring is a gun whereby you shoot, and you can spin that ring to position your energy spheres so that you can aim and hit objects as they're coming out. And as you spin it, it spins the whole thing around. I don't know if that's coming through on the it spins very fast, but I don't think Skype is sharing it at full speed. So I'll just try and move it slowly if I can. But the idea is that you position it and then you fire an energy blast down into the tunnel to destroy any aliens that are coming out. The aliens were to be firing back, so not only you had to be careful they don't hit your energy spheres, because one by one they can destroy them. So you go from having 4 spheres, eventually to none. So, and that was it. I didn't really get much further than that, than all the nice graphics and getting this ring to spin and the stars. And then I said, I've got a better idea. So I stopped it after all that.
Now, do you ever go back to old projects and think about, you should finish them, or maybe, say you're hitting some speed limitations, now you got the 6309, maybe that would make it worthwhile again, or?
Well, I think about it, but then I keep thinking about other ideas, and I say, which one do I do? An old rehash or redo it, or recreate something new? So I tend to always look for something new. Having said that, I have rehashed my Donut Dilemma several times over the years, so occasionally I do go back and redo something, but generally I prefer just doing something new.
Okay, and as a follow-up for something like this where you actually got fairly far and you kind of had the design specs for the game, have you ever considered releasing what you've done and seeing if somebody else could finish it? I'm not volunteering.
No, not really, because then you'd get hammered by questions. What does this routine do? What does that routine do? And you did that pretty crappily. And I thought, nah, I'm not going to go for that.
All of a sudden, everyone's an expert, right?
That's right. Everyone suddenly becomes an expert. So I thought, nah.
Nothing worse than a Monday night or a Monday morning quarterback.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So I figured, well, it's my creation. I did it my way.
It's like Frank Sinatra.
That's right.
But with a good disassembler, anybody can take it apart after the fact anyway.
Yeah, but it's also easier if you've got access to the programmer, the original programmer, and then you can hound him with questions. So I figured, I don't want that.
Right. I don't know if you already mentioned the reason why, Nick, but James Ross is asking, why did you quit working on it?
I'm trying to remember exactly why, whether it was another idea I thought, and then I just switched over. Because, looking back at it now, it does look good. I must admit, it looks impressive. But at the time, I guess when you're working on something and you spend so much time at it, you tend to forget about the good things about it, and you're sort of focused on the bugs and the things you wish you had done better and all that. And it gets to the point where this looks like an inferior product, and you come up with a new idea, and you think, this new idea will be much better. So you say, trash that and start something else. Then, like my Cosmic Ambush, I remember when I did that, and if you read my my website, and I explained how I had these grand visions of making it the ultimate shoot 'em up, and I was going to try sell it to Tandy in the US and maybe get it into a ROM cartridge and all these great ideas. And then Tandy, of course, discontinued the color computer. Then I just lost all interest. I just stopped the project. I thought, forget it. What's the point? And I revisited it back about 12 months later. I had a friend come over who knew I was doing it, and he basically said, hey, have you finished your Cosmic Ambush? I says, no, I stopped it because of this and that. And he said, show me what you've done so far. And I showed it to him at the stage it was at then. And, he was impressed, and so was I. I thought, gee, that did look good. It would be a shame to stop doing that. So I just continued it enough to get it across the line and just basically released it as shareware or freeware anyway. But, you get hung up on a project so much that you forget about all the good attributes of the game, because you're so focused on all the bugs and all the problems and what you could have done this and that better. And then with me, my bad habit is that I start thinking about another project, and then the new project has more merit, so I just switch over.
Hey, Nick, can you do us all a favor and maybe post a short video of what we're seeing on the Skype there, the actual thing? Because the people that are watching the actual YouTube channel, they're seeing it as a stutter, and your start feel is so smooth. They should really see it the way it was intended.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. I can do a video. All right. I'll do a short video and say the game what that was.
There you go.
Yeah, maybe even include that in the next Gunstar blog of just,
little side note.
Well, speaking of blogs, Nick, I do have a question for you because, your blogs are some of the most, not only just well designed as far as the content, but these look really good. And I know there are some people who are working on projects that are thinking about starting a blog. I've put together my little crappy blog that I'm doing in WordPress, and you know, there's something to having a well-looking blog. And I was wondering if there's anything you can share if anybody who's thinking about doing a project blog, and what tools you use or what plugins or whatever you might recommend for somebody.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's great that you say it's a good-looking blog, but it's really very basic. I'm not really much of a HTML or web design person at all. I just use some freeware program called Composer, spelt with a K. It's just some freebie I found, and it's a very what you see is what you get type editor, and that's all I used, and I just put it together fairly simplistically. Really, I don't use any fancy HTML stuff at all. I mean,
so you're running a local editor on your computer, and you design your page, and then
editor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think most blog sites you do all your WYSIWYG stuff within the web form itself, and I find some of those very restrictive on formatting and just kind of some of the cosmetic touches that you can do. Like WordPress is user friendly, but it's feature poor. You know.
Yeah, I don't know if mine is all that feature rich either. It doesn't really I don't know how to make it do anything more than what you've seen in the blog. It's very plain, really. I think what's more important
is quite well.
Yeah, I think what's most important about a blog or whatever, or any website really, is just laying out the website so it's at least logical and clear and easy to find the information. I mean, I put a lot of emphasis on the content of the web page and what I'm trying to show, what I'm trying to say, and I just think about making sure it's very clear, very easy for people to read, to navigate through the page. Otherwise, as far as razzle dazzle, I don't think the website's all that great. Steve Bjork can do much better websites, of course, than mine, but I keep it very simple as much as I know.
Well, the secret there is you write your own content management system.
Yeah, that's
if
right.
you need a feature, you could just add it to your code.
Yeah, no, that's right. The only problem is, of course, I don't know anything more about programming beyond the CoCo. So
I gave up trying to count how many languages I know.
The C3PO. I am fluent in 6 million forms of communication. Now, it looks really impressive, though. It does. And I do see here that, the Skype is not doing it justice.
No,
or the
it's
YouTube
not
stream is not doing it justice. Yeah.
The spin is quite fast, but, you don't see it on the Skype. If I move it up one bit at a time, you can see it actually does have a few more frames that are missing on the final video, because it spins very fast.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Yeah, I'll just hold the button down and see whatever Skype can. Yeah, you see little bursts of speed there on the video, but
we're getting about 1 frame per minute.
Yeah,
on the,
it
YouTube
stops
feed,
and starts. And it doesn't do that. It just rolls around while the stars are moving as well in the middle.
No, that's quite impressive.
Yeah. I quite like the design too, because I mean, for doing a
project.
Tempest clone, it's got some original concepts, like the 4 different fire points and stuff too. So it was, partly based on the original game, but also partly original on its own.
You know what it reminds me of a little bit too is like Gyrus, because Gyrus, your spaceship spun 360 degrees around the screen, and you were shooting at planets that kind of zoomed out from the center. So that's got a little flavor of that in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we never really had too many. I think we only had one Tempest clone that I know of on the CoCo, and that was actually a semi-graphics one from Computerware, Storm,
right?
Yeah.
Well, there's some definite things in the gameplay. The one avenue I would say avoid going down is, you talked about you have your 4 weapons that fire and they can get destroyed. The problem is as those get destroyed, it makes it more frustrating for the player because they don't have the firepower they had to get to the level where they're currently at, and they can die very quickly. I would do something where maybe temporarily takes out a weapon or makes it a little weaker if that's what you're going in, but don't take it out completely. The most frustrating point in Missile Command is when you start losing your bases.
Yeah. I can't remember what my original plans were, whereby you can rebuild your energy guns or whatever.
Yeah, or maybe if you kill a certain alien, it recharges a gun or something.
Yeah, there might be certain energy points that you pick up and you can recharge a gun or whatever. Or was it that I had many lives? So even if you lost them all, you just switch to another life. So you might have 9 lives. So the game would. I can't remember what my plans were, and honestly, I may not have had a plan. Because a lot of these games, you sort of come up with a base plan, a base idea, and you start putting it together, and you think, okay, we'll see how it evolves from there. What works, and then where can I take? What's the next logical thing to throw in? So, like Steve says, I might have put the four guns up there and found, oh, gee, it's getting pretty bad when you lose the guns. What can I add in now? So you sort of work it out as you go until you finally get something that's reasonable at the end of it all. Popstar Pilot was the same.
Oh, even Cosmic Ambush, because you get your power-ups, so your weapon gets more and more powerful, and then if you get hit, it goes back down, but you can still fire more power-ups and get it back up again. Yeah,
you can always build it up. So part of the game strategy is maintaining your weapon supply as well. Yeah, like I said, Popstar Pilot wasn't planned either. I just knew I wanted something with a scrolling background, and it had to, a plane buzzing around shooting at things. Exactly what the game was going to be, well, I never planned that. I just thought, let's just jump in and whatever comes out. I'll build it as I go. And the thing is, that's good and bad. But I mean, it's bad because you get to a point whereby you look at the game and thought, if I actually gave this some thought early on, I could have done this and that and made the game even better. You sort of take the road and wherever it leads you. Whereas if you had planned it earlier, you could have taken another road and the game would have been something different. But that's how I am, a bit chaotic, sort of.
And Steve, I was going to ask, like when you were doing original games as opposed to ports, where you kind of have everything laid out for you as to what it's supposed to do. Which method did you use? Did you pre-plan the whole thing ahead of time, or did you kind of wing it like Nick did and kind of adapt as you went?
Well, because of time restraints, a lot of it had to be designed in the beginning phases. We had, in the beginning, I was the artist, the programmer, the game designer, and everything else. So later in life, you had other things, other people coming in and doing that. I think the first person I ever had working on one of my games was some sort of music designer, a composer, putting this stuff together. But when you are the only person developing it, you get an idea in your mind about where you want to go. Obviously, if things don't work out in the game design, you have to be flexible and move back and forth. Let's see. I had a conversation with Marty Goodman not long after he was trying to basically show people how to pirate Zaxxon. And that's a story for another day. But anyways, one thing he always liked about my games is he says that I back off. Obviously, you're playing the game and you get to a certain point in the game where it's just becoming too hard and you die. And that my games would always kind of have, okay, you died. I will back off the difficulty just a little bit to give you a chance to kind of get your rhythm going again and build up what you need, and then you can continue moving through the obstacles that you couldn't move through before. And that comes from the fact that in addition to taking programming classes and doing self-study on programming, I also was taking psychology classes and was studying the human psyche as far as, what is fun and what is frustrating. And I try to keep my games on that bitter edge of being fun and challenging without tipping over into the frustrating level. And
that's interesting to hear, because when I interviewed Ken Kalish years ago, he had the exact same philosophy.
Yeah, you're gonna find that the people that play games that they love, there's definitely a certain level of not frustration. It's you're getting a reward system because you're able to get to a point that you weren't able to get before. You were able to climb a mountain that you could never climb before. You got up there, you succeeded. There's the dopamine that gets ejected into your body to make you feel good. So that's what we're shooting for. These days, I really hate a lot of the game designers because they're controlled by the marketing department and accounting, because they want it. Well, perfect case is Angry Birds. They have levels in there that are just so frustrating. You're not going to be able to get by them unless you pay that buck to have that Super Eagle to bust through the level. Where's the challenge in that?
That's the whole financial model, basically.
Exactly. So I'm not happy with the direction a lot of games are going these days. It's more like we'll take them to a point, but money is the way to solve your problem, not skill.
Yeah, and I think Nick has actually said something similar about designing the games that he does. That you're trying to get to that edge where the player doesn't want to give up. Like this is too frustrating, I quit.
Right. I want their heart beating, but I don't want to give them a heart attack.
You play Dagraf then.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned that you actually program your games that you would back off the difficulty after you die. I'd never really thought of that, but that actually makes a lot of sense. Because then you wouldn't be immediately back to the frustration level. You would, okay, I can kind of get the hang of this again.
Exactly. Basically, oh boy, what was that really early game I did for the CoCo?
Popcorn?
Popcorn, that's it. Yeah, Popcorn. That was the one that Marty said that he really liked because, every time you died, you lost a paddle. That meant it was going to be harder. And how could I solve the problem? Because the paddles meant how much life you had. So how could I solve the problem where now it's more frustrating because it's harder a game? Well, you back off the difficulty and like that. So that was the solution to the problem there. And it kept the people going.
Yes, that's very insightful. I'm glad. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's interesting to hear talking about not only a philosophy, but then injecting some psychology into it too, because I don't know if that's a conscious decision by everybody who makes games, because some of the people you talk to who make games say they're not even really game players, which I find almost hard to comprehend, but that's a whole nother thing. But to be consciously aware of these psychological elements is really interesting to hear.
Well, as far as game development these days, usually you can have a team of anywhere from 5 to hundreds of people developing the game, and you have psychologists, you have artists, you have writers, storytellers, musicians, all sorts of disciplines that are involved in the game, and of course now accountants and marketing people are getting involved too.
Mm-hmm. Getting back to what Nick was saying about kind of a little bit freewheeling some of his game development decisions. Since Steve, you're a musician, and Curtis, you're a musician. When you develop software, are there certain parallels to writing music as well, where the creative process and some things you might retool or rethink going on there?
I would say yes in my case. I mean, on some of the songs I've written, sometimes they've ended up fairly close to what I originally envisioned, just noodling around. I'd somebody come up with a riff or something. And then there's other times where it's ended up completely changed. Like I'll just be improvising something and all of a sudden I'll go, that would sound a lot better if I changed this. And then I'd change it and, this does sound better. And then I'd scrap the original idea entirely.
It's a creative process. So nowadays, when you're just a lone programmer, designer, everything in one, you do have the freedom to be creative. You do it because it's a creative thing to do. You're not trying to just. It's not just a job whereby these are the specs, build it, and that's it. You're creating something, so hence you need to have that flexibility. Oh, I don't like that, I'll change it, or you'll come up with new ideas. You're free to change it and just change and be creative.
Yeah, and there's positives and minuses to both methods, where you have like a single person that you can be as creative as you want and make things up on the fly. And then the pro of going with the large group is that you can have some specialists that are really, really good at their particular discipline, far beyond your own personal capability. Like, for example, let me say music for a game. Like, if you're not a musician, or you're only used to doing certain types of music, like, which would probably be more my style. Like, if I needed a game that needed a jazz soundtrack, I wouldn't have a clue what to do. So the positive with having the team group thing is that as long as they collaborate well together, you can actually come up with stuff better than you would have been able to do on your own.
Yeah.
I would like to add one correction, though. I am not a musician. I used to be a magician, but I'm not a musician.
Oh, interesting. You've always featured very music-centric games. I just assumed you were.
No, that was the first person to come on to my team or be contracted to or whatever it was to put music. You also have to remember, CoCo was not my first area of doing games. I was doing stuff for a couple other machines before that.
Yeah, including the Model 1 and 3 too, correct?
Yes, they were also in there too. I won't talk about the Atari 2600. Oh God, that was a nightmare.
A challenge.
No, it was a nightmare. You had to do, okay, the Atari 2600, I actually knew people that went nuts after working on it. Literally, this one guy had fireballs chasing him. So I'd call that nuts. No, you had to sit there in 76 clock cycles, build the entire scan line of the display. And you had to do it in exactly 76 clock cycles because you had to generate the horizontal sync. So if you were at 75, it screwed up the screen. If you were at 77, it screwed up the screen. It had to be exactly 76. And you had to do that marching down the entire screen. The only thing the Atari 2600 helped you with as far as building the video display is it would handle the V-blank for you.
That does sound like a challenge.
Oh. As I said, I know more than one person that worked on the 2600 that went crazy.
Wow.
I guess it gives you an appreciation for the people that did really good games on it too, because it must have been just an exercise in frustration.
A little background, Yara's Revenge. A lot of the stuff that you see on the screen, the sounds you hear, is typically came from where things went wrong as far as generating graphics, and they utilize those techniques to make the game.
It's like glitch soup. That's very cool. That almost sounds like we could have a whole day one time to talk about nothing but game design concepts and philosophies and all that kind of stuff. I would. It's fascinating to me to hear these kind of things.
And the psychology part. I mean, it's nice hearing that Steve also took psychology class stuff to do that too. I can't remember if Ken said he actually took classes for it, but I know in his particular case, he really emphasized that a lot of the sounds that he generated were specifically for a psychological reaction, like some of the stuff he did in Phantom Slayer as an example. He spent a lot of time, probably more time, developing the sound to get it to sound right to create a reaction than designing the graphics, for example.
Look at Dungeons of Dagerath and the Heartbeat. That's a classic.
You don't know how many times I went to Tandy and begged them to put a sound chip in the CoCo. I said, Atari's got it. Commodore's got it. You want some good sounding games? Put it in your frickin' computer. And they kind of did that with the deluxe color computer, but it never came out.
Yeah.
And they actually had how many of those made? Like it was like something like 50,000 were actually off the production line, and they scrapped it or something.
Well, not that much in complete parts. They were getting parts in. And if you remember, Radio Shack at one time sold this keyboard.
Separate add-on after the fact.
Yeah, they just sold it in a baggie with a cardboard top or whatever. And what those were is from that production line. But they didn't complete it. They killed it off early enough. Didn't cost him that much money. But I would have to say that was probably a good thing they did, because they had some weird stuff in there. They had extra memory, but the memory was being used for a RAM drive. And people wouldn't understand if they put something in the drive and the computer either was turned off or crashed or rebooted, that drive was gone. And so was that data. And people wouldn't understand that. And then there was the only enhancement to the graphics was the fact that you could shift the color. So you would still have 4 color modes, but instead of, like, let's say red, yellow, let's see, what was that? Red, yellow, green, whatever
blue,
that green,
green and blue,
green, you could have purple, turquoise, and like that. They just shifted the phase on the color clock. By the way, the shifting of the phase of the color clock didn't work outside the U.S. Anything that wasn't NTSC, which led to another reason why the machine was canceled.
Yeah.
Yes.
Shockmaster here, two weeks ago, was saying he can actually do that on a Color Computer 1, NTSC Color Computer 1 with the existing CoCo. He could actually get something like 16 colors by changing the phase.
Mm-hmm.
Like
but
said.
very tight timing loops from what I remember he telling
Very
talking
tight
about.
timing loops, yeah.
You couldn't do it for an arcade game. You might be able to do it for like a graphic adventure or something.
I assume that what Steve's saying about doing it in the deluxe CoCo, they must have added some extra functionality so that you could do it. I don't know.
Well, you can do it by scan line. You could do it for the entire screen. Of course, if you want to sit there on the timing and flip the thing like you do so much on so many CoCo stuff, yeah, you could do it then. But it was never designed. Oh, did I ever say the other thing I wanted thrown in was the display list from the Atari 400, 800 computer systems.
Yep.
Oh. Hey, look, I program on other machines. I looked at it. The only advantage the CoCo had is we had a flat bitmap graphic system. So if we wanted to change a pixel, it was pretty easy to change the pixel. Other machines were a little bit more complicated.
That and the 6809, I think, versus, say, a 6502.
Oh, God. That was one of the things that also drew me nuts on the Atari 2600 was a 6502 processor.
Yeah, with just 8-bit registers, and if you want to do a long branch, you have to like do double branch or self-modify code or...
So, Steve,
self-modifying code.
Steve, with the Color Computer 3 hardware design, what's the one or two things that you felt they fell short on the design, that something that you would have wished they had have included in the CoCo 3, which they didn't?
Well, before I answer anything, I posted one message in the CoCo Facebook page where I said, you have to remember when they're developing the Color Computer 3, the goal as far as the marketing and the management side and like that was concerned is the Color Computer 3 had to cost less to manufacture than at that time the current CoCo 2. And that was going to be the trick. You know, how do you add more memory, give it more graphics capability, and yet make it cheaper to manufacture in your current model? And they managed to do it. It actually was a less expensive machine. Not by much, but it was less expensive. And they were able to charge more. So marketing was very happy. Accounting was very happy with the fact that the profit margin was so much better on that machine. But what I would have wanted, I would have definitely wanted a better sound chip. I would have wanted something along the lines of you know how you got a text mode? And which is basically nothing more than character graphics. I would have wanted like what you have on Atari, what you got on Commodore, Most of the video games that you see out there, the arcade video games,
Programmable characters? Is that what
they're
you mean?
programmable characters. That's exactly what they are. Zaxxon, it had a bitmap for the background. So when you're flying over the fortress was a bitmap graphic system. The ship, the things that you shot, they were all characters. They were scrolling character field. And what you did is you had nothing but blank characters up, and when you needed to change something in the graphic system, you looked at the characters that were affected, you pulled them out, you made a special set of characters that were like miniature bitmaps, and you drew your image into that. And believe it or not, you're updating not that much memory, and you're able to move things a lot faster because you've got the character scrolling screen built into the hardware. So, yeah, I was really jealous of things like the Commodore and the Atari for having those modes because there's so much more I could have done with the machine as far as doing fast graphics.
Yeah. So
Now, Steve.
Go
ahead, Nick.
Sorry, I was just about to say the sound chip certainly does seem to be the number one criticism of the color computer as far as gamers are concerned. That's one thing that Tandy should have put in. It's always the sound chip, the lack of a sound chip. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the programmable timer that they put in was to appease me. Because with the programmable timer, I could generate sounds, I could add background dialogue, I could do a lot of things with that programmable timer. And that was to appease me, and the other people kept screaming for, we want a sound chip.
Yeah. The timer is certainly very good. I do use that a fair bit, but there's still limits to what you can do. You can't beat having a real sound chip to have, say, a background tune playing while you've got your while Zaxxon's playing, for example.
Well, that's the reason why quite a few of the CoCo games I wrote for Tandy did use the Speech Sound Pack's sound capability.
Yeah, that's right. You being pretty well the only one who did.
Well, you come up with the routines are able to be reused from time to time again, so you throw it in, and 1% of the people that actually may have a multi-pack with the cartridge and the sound pack could actually use it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, you're the only one who really used the sound part, like for the music part more so. A lot of people did voice. A lot of the third-party stuff would talk, during an adventure game or something like that, but you're the only one who actually really used the sound chip to any extent.
Well, I like the sound chip because it was the same one that was used in,
Tandy 1000?
No, Vectrex.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Ah. Can you shed any light onto the difficulty or lack of difficulty to program for that? Because there's been this ongoing discussion about that cartridge being difficult to program, having to go through the PIC and being restrictive or having latency involved with it. And since you're pretty much the only one who's really done any music with this, can you really, give us the straight dope on that?
Well, the problems with timing to go in there to change things and stuff like that, I solved by using the vertical interrupt, the 60 hertz interrupt, to be my main interface into the chip. Because I would create a buffer that, a first in, first out buffer that would have the commands, and then that command would be fed in once every 60th of a second, which was sufficient for what I was working on. I'd be no more than a 30th of a second behind if I had to do two commands. And I was able to change the tones as needed.
That would be just covering the music, not sound effects, or both?
Well, yeah, sound effects too. I would look into that. Now, on other systems that were much more elaborate, where I had multi-channel and stuff like that, I would create a system where I kind of remembered what was playing as far as a sound, and if it was a sound that would be decaying, in other words, be getting quieter, that sound would have a moment where I'd say, okay, I could reuse that channel for that. As I'm starting to remember, how many sound chips were in the speech sound pack? It was just one chip.
3 channels.
Yeah.
3 channels.
Yeah.
3 plus 1 noise, I think, if I remember.
Yeah, exactly. It was one chip, 3 channels, and like that. And what I would do is, if the sound was a single channel, it would play out, and as it would decay in volume, at a certain point, I could decide whether or not that channel could be reused again for another sound effect. So I could kind of almost make it where the 3 channels could actually handle much more sound, because I wouldn't let something completely finish out because it was so quiet the other sounds would override it anyways. But that's one of the ways I got around some of the limiting issues of there. There was also, the reason why I got a little confused is because a long time ago on the older systems like the TRS-80, I made something called Soft Music, which was a 2-voice music system. And then I created something called Hard Music, where I had used that same chip, one for the left and one for the right channel. And I did something similar. So I actually had 6 channels plus 2 noises to create music or sound effects or whatever. And, the CoCo was just one chip, and I kind of took that technology that I developed for that system and brought it over to the CoCo. So I guess that's maybe another reason why I worked with this. I was already familiar with the chip and written some of the drivers to handle this stuff.
The only problem with the sound and speech cartridge, though, was the fact that it didn't work at high clock speed on the CoCo 3, unfortunately.
Yeah, which is why I kind of gave up with it on the CoCo 3 when I needed speed.
Yeah.
Now, I do remember, and I should pull out my notes on it, there is a way of modifying the cartridge so it'll work on both regular speed and high speed without flipping any switches or whatever.
Yeah.
The first one that was generally out there is you could put a switch in so it basically cut the frequency. And it had to do with 2 elements. One was how fast the system was able to take data in on the I/O clock. In other words, the clocks might be a little too fast for the chip to bring it in. There was a way to modify it so it could handle that speed. But the other reason is they used the clock that going to the chip to run a DC to DC converter. And the problem was when you raise the clock frequency, the DC to DC converter didn't work anymore for the, I think it was -5 volts that they're trying to create.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Yeah, because the speech sound cartridge had to be developed so that it would work with or without a multipack, which a multipack gave you all the voltages, like what you had on the original CoCo, but you didn't have on the later CoCos.
Yeah, the 12 volt.
Yeah, there was a 12 volt, but I think, wasn't there a -5 volt line in there somewhere? Or the cartridge needed 5. I can't remember. It's been, we're talking how many decades?
A couple.
Yeah,
Only 3.
more than a few. But I had taken one cartridge and I've modified it so that it work at regular speed or high speed, and was modifying both the frequency issue for the power supply, and then it being able to successfully take a write to it.
Yeah.
Now, did you try to sell that concept back to Tandy that they could do a revised sound speech that would work on both the old hardware and the new hardware?
We're getting close to the end of the CoCo, and Tandy, by the time that the CoCo 3 came out, they weren't that interested in the cartridge.
Okay, because I know, like, you designed the high-res joystick interface for them, so I was wondering if they had any thought about doing the modified pack that would work with both CoCo 3 and CoCo 1.2.
By the way, the original high-res joystick interface was supposed to be another design that I had created, and the retail price of that would have been $100.
Ouch.
And they said, go back and redesign it so it's cheaper. I go, how much cheaper? Oh, as cheap as you can get. Okay, I'll come up with something. And I designed something that Tandy could build the entire package and everything for $2.50.
Wow.
So that's why you guys got stuck with a voltage pump-based high-res joystick interface.
Yeah, and then Sockmaster came up with a way of timing, how capacitors bleed off and stuff to actually do it in software, which is a pretty incredible feat.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, capacitors bleeding off, that's in That's almost more of a logarithmic gauge on how they do that. In the case of what I was doing, I used a linear voltage pump so that no matter where you are on the wiper, when I'm doing the voltage compare, it would be linear. I mean, it would be linear opposed to logarithmic. So you wouldn't have to do number recalculations after you look at it.
Yeah, it was a bit less CPU intensive than I think SOC's solution was.
I was trying to be as accurate as possible. Now, one other thing I wanted to throw in there was some sort of power supply conditioning, and they said no, they want to keep that price down. Their goal was to have something they could sell for about $10 once I gave them their initial design. So that's the reason why if you've got some circuitry that's fluctuating a little bit inside the CoCo, if you're doing a lot of things in there, that's why the joystick will vibrate a little bit.
Yeah, get that jitter.
Yeah, the best way to get rid of the jitter is to do the read on a 60 hertz because you also have noise in the environment, which is coming from your old CRT, and your CRT generated the same amount of noise on the V-blank. So if you took it during the V-blank, you had the same interference.
Okay.
And cut down the jitter.
Now, since we've got you on, and you actually were part of the the original pre-release versions of the CoCo 3, and we've seen some of the original spec sheets that Microware had received, like the very first versions of the CoCo 3 internal design were supposed to have that, I can't remember what the name of it was, that whole Motorola 4096 color multi-board thing that they had prototyped, and of course that ended up being too expensive. But I was wondering, did you have any input, or did you see any of those early designs when they had like the full 256 color mode that we talked about on Facebook and all that kind of stuff that Mark was mentioning?
Yeah, that's the thing is, I saw some stuff, but they really kept it quiet from us programmers that were developing games because they knew we would want things in there that would raise the price. So they basically, like I was screaming bloody murder for that sound chip and going, you're putting it in the deluxe. Let's put it in the CoCo 3. And they go, we can't do it. It's going to cost too much. And as I said, the programmable timer was to appease us. So, we got what we got. We got 6-bit color per gun instead of 8. And tell you honest truth, when we looked at video games, we're really not getting that many bits of color more. A typical video game was 8-bit color, not 6-bit. And what you kind of did is blue was the one that was always hardest to tell the difference between the colors, so it would always get the less guns or less bits.
Yeah, you have 3 bits for the other two and 2 bits for the blue.
Exactly. So, and here we were getting 6 bits per gun. We should be grateful. But yeah, everybody else was doing 8 bits per gun. So, yeah, just the thing is, I'm a hardware engineer in addition to a software engineer, and when they would get into designing things, I would suggest stuff, and sometimes corporations don't like to have suggestions from the outside. 2 reasons. One, people want to keep their jobs because they want to make sure that everything is their suggestion and why they're being paid the big bucks. And the second thing is, if somebody suggests something from the outside, you may end up having to pay them for it if you don't have a contract.
Something that we were just discussing before this live feed was whether it was possible to have, say, the sound from a sound and speech cartridge playing and mixed in with the 6-bit sound, so you can have the best of both worlds. I looking at the CoCo memory maps, that doesn't seem to be the case. We're just wondering if you can clarify whether that is correct, that you can only have one of those sound sources playing or selected in the hardware.
Yeah, as I recall, that's true, because you had a multi-selector controller that allowed you to select between the DAC, a single bit, and external, and I think the third option was nothing.
Yeah, it is. The single bit, I think, was mixed in. Like it was outside of that, I think. Just trying to do this off the top of my head here. But yeah, certainly the sound inline from the cartridge and the DAC were separate inputs. You could only have choose one of those inputs, which is a shame because it would have been good to have them be mixed. You could have the benefits of a sound chip playing music and the benefits of a DAC playing sample sounds together, but you can't. Not easily.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
but that's one nice side effect of having the DAC is that we can do sampled sounds. You're not limited to whatever a sound chip would have let you do. Unfortunately, it's CPU intensive.
Yeah, everybody kept asking me in the beginning when I was doing my samples, why they were coming out so clear. And I said, well, I didn't use the DAC in the CoCo to record it. I went out and recorded on a PC that was 8-bit DAC and sampled it down to 6. And then also I was going at a higher initial rate, and I brought it down to, I think I typically use 6 kilohertz. It seemed to be about the best compromise between how much CPU time you lost and the quality of the audio. But the real thing was I never used the CoCo to sample anything.
Yeah, well, I remember there, I believe Triad and a few other companies actually came out with 8-bit recording hardware cards so that you could actually do the full 8-bit and then downsample it afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, you can just download WAV files or whatever off the internet, which are 8-bit or 16-bit samples, and then do exactly what Steve says, downsample them to 6-bit and coerce them into the CoCo.
Yeah.
And Steve, did you ever consider, I don't recall any of your programs doing this, but did you ever consider using the ORC90 to have 2 8-bit DACs to get some better quality sound plus stereo?
No, because that would require multi-pack combination. And if I was going to do that, I would probably support the speech sound cartridge, because there I could let the sound go off on its own work, and I could have that CPU time that would normally go off to the ORC90 to work on my games. I mean, everything was about clock cycles for the games, and still keep everything more or less copacetic with Tandy's requirements as far as how software is designed for it.
Okay.
I would have to agree with Steve there. That's why I haven't touched the ORC90 either.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff I've done with the ORC90, I can get some pretty good quality sound, but that's at the expense of everything else.
Yeah, it's not much over the built-in DAC really, apart from the fact it's 8-bit and 2 channels, I guess.
Yeah, like my play command under OS9 actually will play stereo WAV files type thing with full 8-bit. Sounds nice, but it's basically that's all you can do at that point.
Yeah, whereas a sound chip gives you that extra freedom.
And my games that I used, it's not that really CPU intensive because they're puzzle games.
Yeah, you just basically use the stereo effect to pan left and right as you move shapes across, which I thought was kind of cool. But yeah, they weren't digitized samples or anything.
Yeah, so a different situation. So,
well, for doing digitized audio and like that, whether it be music or voice or sound or whatever, these days in my projects I work on, I'm putting this little thing called a DF Player Mini into my projects, and I can pick up these guys for about $1.50 each. Put an SD card on it, micro SD card on it, and play literally thousands of files. And, it's a no-brainer for doing audio. As a matter of fact, I could see somebody taking maybe 4 or 5, maybe 4 to 8 of them, stick them on a card, and have that for a CoCo.
What was that chip?
It's called the DF Player, and then the space as a blank character, MIDI.
MIDI.
So
is that a built-in MIDI like in a chip?
It's not a MIDI player. It plays MP3s and WAV files.
Oh,
you put it on an SD card, and what you do is you talk to it via serial. You send in at 9600 baud a packet of information, which is about 8 bytes long. That's a command that tells it play a particular file, set the volume. Even you can set up the EQ on it, and it plays stereo out at line level, and it also has a mono out connection that will play up to 3 watts in a speaker. So if you got a little speaker, or it works. And I'm using it right now in projects to do with the Halloween haunt industry.
Right. Might look into that for the color computer. Oh, was it
Very
a
cool.
DF player MIDI?
Mini,
M-
as in small.
MIDI. Sorry.
Yeah.
He's Australian.
Yeah.
That's right. We speak upside down. DF player mini. Okay.
Yeah, the Adrenal community has gone nuts for the player, and when they first came out, they were about $10 a pop, but I can get them all day long at $1.50 or so from Asia. You just got to wait a couple weeks for them to come in. And they're about the size. They're about the size of a micro SD card.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve, I'm looking at the page right now because I pulled it up, and I'm like, all the different I/O pins. It's the perfect size for a breadboard if you want to play with the prototype. It's 3.2 volts to 5 volts, so it's perfect range for both types of version of Arduino devices.
Yeah, if you hook it up to a TTL signal that's coming from 5 volts on the receive line, in other words, your transmit line that's going into its receive, you got to use a 1,000 ohm resistor to do the voltage drop, but at least you don't have to use an elaborate voltage drop system for it.
Nice.
Yeah.
And with 5-volt support, that would work on the CoCo directly too, right?
Exactly. That's why I'm saying you could put, like 4 or 8 of them on a card, and you could have multiple voices going. You just need some sort of support controller to take the information from the CoCo, and then it goes out and tells what all the different channels to do.
Certainly something to look at.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's small enough and cheap enough that allows you to create a nice little module. I've got something I'm working on called the Sound Matrix that's going to use either 4 or 8 of them for the Halloween industry.
So if you used to use something like that with, you could possibly do something like the old, the old Gravis sound cards where they had the wavetable MIDI. So you could do something similar with these.
Right. You can tell it to play. You can have one playing one audio track, which is your background music. Then you have your specialized music that comes in. So you can have your background, your primary. Then you can have a bunch of the other guys running different sound effects.
Well, the price is right.
Yeah. Somebody could make a very inexpensive CoCo cartridge with this, and with the size of them, the cartridge would definitely be about the size of the old style floppy speech sound pack. I don't think you can get it down to the size of a game cart. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Maybe if you use both sides.
You could probably stack them.
Yeah.
You
can't stack them because they're commands the way they're the way the pins are set up. They're not stackable.
And it just uses standard micro SD cards for storage?
Yeah. That's the other trick too. When you put them onto the board, you got to make sure that you can slide your cards in.
Yeah, the CoCo SDC is already doing that as it is. So
yeah. Well, when you start talking about, let's say, putting 8 of these guys on the board, you got to lay out the board properly so you can make sure you can plug the cards in.
Would you need a micro SD card in each one of the?
Yes, you would.
Okay, so that micro SD would kind of act as like the flash or ROM storage of whatever's on each of these devices to pull from.
Right.
Gotcha.
True. It would make it difficult to make a multi-game system, you might say, but Something that's very interesting about the software design of the card is you can have up to 99 folders of audio files. So if people got together and used this, you could say folder 1 is for this game, folder 2 is for this game, folder 3 is for this game. And you can put up to 255 MP3 or WAV files within that folder.
That could be like background music, sound effects, all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. Well, the idea that I'm suggesting here is that folder 1 would be for Zaxxon Reborn. Folder 2 would be for, what's your latest game that you're working on there, Nick?
Gunstar.
Gunstar. Well, folder 2 would be for Gunstar, and that would go across the board. You put those in there. So yeah, there's a little bit involved in setting it up because you got to write to all those SD cards. But if you come up with a system where as a game gets developed that's major, it requests a particular folder, and then they own that folder from that point on.
And you can even reuse assets. Like if you had a sound effects folder for gunshots and stuff, you could share them between multiple games.
True. In other words, if somebody was to produce this thing, it'd be a little bit more than just coming out with the hardware. They would have to more or less come out with the standard libraries.
Yeah. Okay. That's certainly something to think about.
Sorry about going down the rat hole there.
No, that's cool.
This isn't the rat hole. This is future hardware design.
Tech talk right here, yeah. Yeah, we're on the verge of a kind of audio explosion. There's a lot of audio hardware being developed right now for the CoCo, as well as the speech sound pack now being emulated in MAME. So I'm hoping there's going to be an audio renaissance in the CoCo, and new hardware and software will be developed to support all these emerging technologies.
Yeah, well, with the speech sound pack in Maine, that means that people could start developing Maine-only games.
Right, develop them in MAME, and they'll run on the real hardware if somebody's got the multi-pack and the SSC, you know?
Well, they could also have basically the multi-pack should work then in Maine on the CoCo 3 version.
Yeah, I wonder if you can bypass the hardware limitation.
On MAME, you could, though, just be a setting.
Come on. We're talking about emulation here. You can do almost anything in that.
Yes, software. That's a great time we live in, when technology makes very few things impossible anymore.
Well, the whole idea I had with that CoCo 4 a while back, until so many people hated me for trying to even suggest it, was to come up with, in an emulation, extra stuff as far as better graphics, adding in sound and stuff like that. The stuff that we've always wanted on our CoCos. Well, then it's not going to be a real CoCo. Now, the CoCo's got to be done in hardware. No, you've got to use the FT, whatever it is.
FPGA.
Yeah, you got to use that because that's hardware. And CoCo's only hardware. No, guys, the CoCo never came with one of those, so it can't be a CoCo. The wars. That's the reason why I shut down the whole CoCo 4 project. I just got tired. I had people cracking my website because they didn't like the fact that I was suggesting the stuff. I had a complete log of people. They didn't think I know who they were, but I sure knew who they were from the log. They were trying to break the site so that there wouldn't be a CoCo 4 because they didn't like the way the CoCo 4 was being developed.
Well, now we've got the FPGA CoCo 3s, and they do have the extra graphics and all that, but I don't see any programs or software being developed to use it. So,
well, there's so few people out there with that hardware, and they keep going, "Oh yeah, well you can go get this." What do those boards run? About $200 minimum.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, the FPGA, I think itself, well, depending on which one you go for, I know the DE0 is roughly $90, $100
plus
for that.
But an emulator's free.
Yeah, yeah.
Software is cheap. Yes, it takes money to design the software, but once it's designed, it's relatively cheap compared to the hardware.
Oh, yeah.
And my background has always been, since I'm a hardware engineer and software engineer, I look for the least amount of hardware that uses the most amount of software to get the job done.
That just
That's
seems
almost the Tandy
insanely,
philosophy.
insanely profound right there. So.
And most of the people that design the stuff around the programmable gate arrays, they're hardware dudes. They only see things as hardware. Plus, I've worked with many of them, and it's like, and I tell these guys, okay, yeah, you can do that in hardware, and it's going to add another $7 to the price of the product. But here, I'm designing this in software, and it adds $0 to the price of the product. And there's no downside. What do you think marketing is going to want to do? I mean, there's a lot of projects. I mean, how many people here have a DVD player?
Not anymore.
I was involved in that when that was coming out.
Wow.
Most of my friends, they were working on the HD DVD, and that lost out to Blu-ray, and I was never so unhappy to see that happen.
Yeah. That was a shame. Microsoft should have got behind their own format, and they didn't.
I mean, Sony would be completely out of business if it wasn't for Blu-ray and their insurance companies that they own in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course,
Sorry,
I don't
Steve.
think. Yeah, my Echo didn't like me saying that. I just noticed.
So, Steve, do you still have a CoCo 3?
I do have a CoCo 3. Yes, it is in the garage. But I'm sitting here in my office. I'm looking up at 4 boxes that say things like CoCo software, source code, CoCo games, and a few others. So, yeah, I still have my stuff around, but it's kind of boxed up.
Wow.
And I still have the CoCo Model 1 that I developed Zaxxon on.
Right.
Yeah, because you had some stuff in the storage unit that got stolen years back too, didn't you?
Yeah, it was the stuff that was mostly for the CoCo 3 era. And a lot of the stuff was on the hard drives that were in the CoCos, and those, they're gone. The guy thought it was a PC he was stealing, but he was stealing a CoCo.
Was it packaged up in a PC case? Is that why you got
Yes, it
confused?
was. Yeah, it was. Just to make it more efficient as far as moving around and holding everything, because I had, hard drives in there and stuff like that. But I still have stuff on floppy. I don't know how much of the floppies work. And I do have 2 CoCo 3 systems with disk drives that work.
And I know at one of the CoCo Fest there, you actually, during one of your talks, you gave some demos of some unreleased games that you had done. Is that some of the stuff that was lost, or is that some of the stuff you might still have?
That's probably, some of that may be on the hard drive. I may have some floppy disks with that stuff, but the games were so incomplete, I don't think they should even be considered worked on. Only, in the 30 years plus since I worked on that stuff, I'd have to say it's about been that long. I would say that I could do a little bit better job.
So the same philosophy Nick has on some of the incomplete projects from the past.
Yeah. Yeah, that CoCo interview I did, where the guy said, who's your favorite programmer? And I basically told him, look, my favorite programmer is tomorrow's me. I'm always going to get better. That's the guy I'm shooting for. That's my favorite programmer. No, he shortened it to, who's your favorite programmer? Me. Never going to live that one down.
Yeah, that was the Color Computer Magazine.
Yeah. Oh, it was such a hatchet job. That's why I still, to this day, won't do an interview unless I get control over Final Copy.
Mm-hmm. I think Barry's going to join us here in just a second.
Oh, that's
he
good.
has.
Well, we'd love to do an extended interview with you, Steve, at some time, and you would have final say. You'd get to see what the product was, and if there's any, changes or things that you decided that you didn't want to reveal that you accidentally did, we can pull that stuff out.
Well, Steve and I briefly talked about on that, but for us to sit down and do a project like that, I want to do it right, and I want to have the time to prepare for it too. So we're looking at sometime probably in November for something like that.
Okay.
So it's not out of the question, but we'll work on that one. The other thing is, I think you had other subjects. I don't want to hijack this.
No, that's fine. No, I mean, it's as long as we're talking about the CoCo, that's what this show is all about. So it's fine.
Okay.
Whatever's being talked about right now is probably a heck of a lot more interesting than any crap I would have came up with. So.
Thank God Steve Bjork arrived.
Yeah. Steve saved us.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we would have gotten to, and we'll probably still want to keep this to our roughly 2-hour window, but we were going to possibly look at Bill's presentation of how to do MAME on a Mac, but we can always save that for another time too. So it's always nice to have something else to look forward to as well. So.
The only reason why you got me today, it's about 100 degrees outside, and I can't work on my Halloween stuff.
Nah.
How long have you been doing the Halloween stuff for now?
Let's see. 20 years unprofessionally, professionally for about the last decade. And like so many of my hobbies, they become professions.
Wow. And so
You've been in magazine publishing and all kinds of stuff over the years.
Mm-hmm. Even appeared on stage in Nevada doing magic with a fellow magician.
Wow.
We'll let you know.
And there's been a couple movies I've been in.
Really? Which ones, if you don't mind me asking?
Goonies. I was at the end. It's difficult for me to see in there. I was one of the reporters. And then there's Pee-wee Herman's Big Adventure. I was in the scene when they're at the drive-in movie.
Geez, I'm going to have to go back and watch some of these.
Yeah,
yeah, right.
I mean, they're minor scenes. See, what it is Ralph, who worked on Sands of Egypt.
Ralph Burroughs?
Yeah. He was a location producer for Warner Brothers. And he says, hey, I'm out. He needed time off from time to time. And I was very flexible there at Datasoft with him. And we worked around his schedule. And he says, hey, how would you like to come out on the set today? I go, okay, sure. Hey, let me put you in the car here, and you can work with this actress as part of the background. Go, fine. So I spent the afternoon with a beautiful actress, helping her with lines for her next, audition that she had. Very appreciative gal, and a lot of our scenes were making out because that's what we're supposed to be doing back there. So it was a very lovely afternoon. Even though it was evening, it was a set, soundstage, but it was a lovely afternoon.
Very cool. Rick, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I was trying to figure out how to mute my microphone, but I have no idea how you do that. I'm on unfamiliar equipment since I'm on vacation.
All right, well, we have you.
So how in the world can I mute myself so that you don't have me?
There's a little icon of a microphone in Skype that you can click on. That will mute you.
Aha, gotcha. Thank you.
I think this is a first for us. We have two professional developers back from the Tandy days on one show.
All right. Well, John Strong's still here too, right?
No, he left at the moment.
Okay, but was John post Tandy days? Did John stuff come out after the?
Well, I meant like that published through Tandy. Well, I guess we've had Rick,
actual Tandy,
Rick and Dale on at the same time too. But
yeah,
it's pretty rare we get two professional developers from the heyday. And Steve, I wanted to ask you, I remember, I think it was at Comdex where they had the CoCo version of Zaxxon on one of the big projection screen TVs back in '83.
Well, we may have had there at Comdex, but our introduction for Zaxxon was at... Okay, I'm trying to remember the name. I want to say West Coast Computer Fair, which was like the big event, the West Coast Computer Fair. This is where Apple introduced the Apple II. This was like one of the big computer shows, and this is where we demonstrated Zaxxon for the first time. We didn't have it on. We didn't have the budget for a big screen.
Okay, I think in Rainbow there was a picture of the CoCo version of Zaxxon running on a big screen, and I thought that was from Comdex or something. Because originally Datasoft released it on its own before Tandy got it, correct?
That's correct, and we were marketing it ourselves. And then once we got the orders from Tandy, part of the agreement was we'd stop kind of marketing it ourselves because they wanted to have the whole pie since they were selling it in the stores.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we sold at the West Coast Computer Fair, I may be getting that name wrong. Anyways, we had, a monitor showing the color computer playing Zaxxon. And everybody was impressed that the color computer could do that. And then all of a sudden, this bunch of sheet of paper show up next to it, and it's how to break the copy protection of Zaxxon's floppy disk. Now, I hadn't got to the show yet, and I get this irate call from the owner, the boss of the company. He's reading me off the list, and he's asking me, will this break the copy protection? And of course, he's reading it one line at a time, and every time he says the line, he goes, will this break it? Will this break it? Will this break it? I go, I don't know. You haven't told me the whole thing. Well, the next thing I know, I'm on an airplane up there, and to find out what's going on. And there's this guy by the name of Marty Goodman who walked up to the booth and stuck the stack of papers right next to the machine displaying it. Now, most of you know this is not something you're supposed to do. Most people wouldn't do this. But Marty, who at the time was a card-carrying communist, felt that people had the right to back up their software. And he wanted to make sure that everybody that saw the game knew that they could back up their software. Well, I wasn't happy. My boss wasn't happy. I wasn't really that. At first, I wasn't that unhappy until I realized how unhappy my boss was. The question if I was going to be able to keep a job or not. And there's a local computer club up there, and I started asking about this Marty Goodman guy. Do you guys know? Oh, yeah, we know him. He's a doctor. He's an anesthesiologist. He seems to self-prescribe occasionally. Anyways, he spent most of the show avoiding me because he realized that what he had done, people weren't happy about. Everybody at the computer club was basically saying to him, why in the hell did you do that? Now, when I finally met Marty a few weeks later at that club, I decided to fly back up to that club, give him, a talk and everything. Marty happened to be there. And I told him jokingly, well, I was so mad that I was going to send Luigi and his boys up there to have a serious conversation with you. And you may need a wheelchair after that. He took it literally. But I got him calmed down, and he apologized for doing it. He didn't think it was that bad what he'd done, but he realizes that was probably not the best venue to distribute how to break the copy protection on the game. But Marty and I became friends after that. But him breaking the copy protection cost me $250,000.
Ouch.
Wow.
Tandy was also going to buy the disc rights to the game, and they canceled it. My royalties on that were that amount.
Wow.
Actually, I was about to ask that because I know the original Datasoft release was on disc and cassette, and then, of course, Radio Shack's was only cassette, and I was wondering what the story was behind that.
That's exactly it. It was because of Marty's leak out there. Now, we immediately put out version 1.1, which had much greater copy protection. Now, back in the day, I have to admit, we had a copy protect. I didn't want people to get stuck with the game. That's why all my games have a demo mode in them. I want people to see what they're getting. And also, demo modes help sell the games at the store. So if your cartridge has a demo mode in it, and they're going to put it in the front window, whose game are they going to put in? The ones that have demos, so I always made sure my game had a demo. But it was also, I didn't want people to get stuck with the game. Personally, if somebody bought a floppy disk version, they didn't like it, I'd love to give their money back to them. The copy protection wasn't so I could keep your money. It was so I could get money. And over the years through piracy, I have lost millions of dollars.
Wow. It's staggering.
Yeah.
It's interesting on the talking about the demo mode too, because I know like Rick and his games that he sold through Tandy as well, he had demo modes like in Temple of Rom and stuff too. And you're right. If you had a game that just did a splash screen and basically sat there waiting for you to hit 1 or 2 players or something like that, they weren't demoed that often because you'd have to have somebody interacting with it to show anything.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I love programming. I love writing games and stuff like that. But this is how I made a living. And it would hurt me when I'd go to a computer club meeting and I'd tell guys, okay, there is an issue about it was Sands of Egypt working on a CoCo 3 or whatever the situation was. And I have a patch, and I'll patch your copy. And first people up there, they had a legitimate copy, and I'm patching them. And all of a sudden, there's a line of that's twice as long of guys that got a blank, no label disc. They say, will you patch mine too? I'm going, did you buy the game? And they go, no. Then why do you think I should patch it? You're not helping me put food on the table. And it just I understand sometimes people can't afford stuff. Well, if you can't afford it, go without. But our society doesn't believe in that anymore. That's why our credit card debt's so bad.
Yeah.
I have a question just kind of segueing from that. What's your opinion on orphanware? Basically where the company has gone under or the programmer's gone on to other things and doesn't care. Like, I know you keep your stuff, but in general, if the author isn't around or isn't, actively trying to do anything with it, what's your opinion on orphan? Like, should the copyright laws change because we have such a long copyright, especially on computer software, which is like a blip in the wind type thing compared to, say, a book?
Well, just remember, copyright is based on Disney law or Mickey Mouse law,
which keeps getting extended,
and probably will. Back in the '60s, there was Disney was very loose with the copyright. Actually, before the '60s, was very loose with the copyright. There, Disney would let a school paint Mickey Mouse on the side of their building, and he had no problem with that. As a matter of fact, he would send out designs to them to help them paint that. And there was no contract, no royalty, no nothing going on. And Disney looked upon it as, hey, this is advertising for me. It's keeping Mickey Mouse in there. Perfect. Problem was Disney was not defending their copyright. And in the 60s, somebody came out with a series of posters of Mickey Mouse toking the joint and Daisy and Donald doing it and stuff like that. And they almost lost the case because Disney hadn't been defending their copyright. And I've had to do this too. I've had, tens of thousands of dollars in lawsuits that I've had to fight because somebody was violating a copyright. And it's not just so much my older copyrights I have to protect. I mean, the newer ones, the ones I'm making money. The older stuff I have to protect too because they become a channel of where I'm losing, I'm not defending my copyright. Then how can I go to court and defend my copyright? I have to defend it across the board on everything that I own. Now, recently, I was able to buy back from Samsung the license agreements that I had on my software with Tandy because they had sold them to Samsung. So I own those. I own the license agreements, which makes it eligible for me to sell my games. And someday, I may actually put together a collection or something like that.
Oh, that'd be cool. What's your opinion on stuff that's been abandoned, though? Like if the company's gone out of business, there's nobody to pursue the copyright. Like, should that be released? Like, I know that's not the law right now, but just in your personal opinion, is that something that should be released?
Well, Okay, there's something that's been in the news lately, and it kind of goes down that line. Older software that's no longer supported should not be used. And a good example of that is the British Trident submarines. They're using Windows XP, which is technically no longer supported. While their systems are air-gapped and there shouldn't be an issue, they should be using a modern operating system that's kept up to date, whether it be Black Hat, Windows 10, or one of the other operating systems out there. And in the case of professional, you want to make sure that everything is up to date, reliable, and supported. Now, as far as these games, we're not looking at the same thing. Nobody's going to get, their town blown up because a Trident missile launched a missile at somebody. But I understand where people want to play it. But the part of the thing is, I think I'd be more friendly to the idea of people playing the games now without paying if they, in the old days, would have paid for the games when they're playing. In other words, the piracy wasn't so bad. It's just, I see it as a form and extension of the piracy. It's a sore spot for me.
Okay. No, I just wondered what your opinion was, because I mean, there's as many opinions as there are people on it, and some people, if an old 8-bit system is no longer manufactured, the company doesn't exist anymore, the principals have passed away. Basically, it's just sitting in copyright limbo, and that's kind of what I was asking what your opinion would be on.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a level where it's hard to find where somebody owns the stuff, but just recently, look how much money made with Nintendo coming out with the NES Classic little machine with all those games. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just the fact that Nintendo made the money. Those companies that owned the rights to those games that were third party, they got some chunk of the money too.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah, so
sometimes this stuff does come back and in a retro package or whatever, and then they actually can make some money off of it again. So that makes sense.
Now, in the business I do with the haunts, where I make these cards that people can build themselves, that's one of my businesses I've got called Haunt Hackers. I give away the software. It's put out as Creative Commons. You can play with it all you want. All I ask is that you distribute any improvements back to the community. So where I make my money is off making the circuit boards, and I don't make that much, but that's for the hobbyist industry. That's just me supporting the folks that are doing Halloween. Now, I've got professional cards that the software is fully copyrighted. It is licensed to the people. It is developed for these professional organizations, but they need something that's reliable, that works well, that's fully supported.
Yeah, and I mean, in the case of my game site, I mean, any of the software I've got on my site, I've gotten permission from the authors to put up, and most of them, they're not planning on ever trying to resell it again, or they don't even have the hardware to even try, or just don't figure it's worth the effort. So, but I've always tried to follow the authors' wishes on that, and if they don't, and there's been a few that have said no, I don't want to, then I just don't.
And a lot of people out there, they have the opinion it's better to ask forgiveness than ask permission. And it's amazing how many people don't. I owned at one time the trademark to Spaceballs. Now, who do you think would have a problem because somebody owns the trademark to Spaceballs?
Mel Brooks.
You got it. I owned the trademark in the division of games. I had came out with a game called Spaceballs and Spaceballs 2, and I had trademarked them. And in their legal, making sure everything is copacetic like that, they came to me and I said, okay, well, let's come up with a license deal. And my license deal was you donate $10,000 to the Boys and Girls Club of Orange County.
Well, that's good. You actually had an altruistic thing as versus just a money thing. That's really nice.
And it was kind of like that. There was a long silence, like, what? And I got a very nice note. It's somewhere in my files from Mel Brooks. After everything's done, he goes, in producing this film, I wish all my endeavors were as easy as with you and cared so much for society as what you did. I mean, I just kind of like, whoa. But I threw out a number like 10,000. I said, but you donate it to the Boys and Girls Club. And the lawyer said, done.
Wow.
So, again, nice check.
Again, back to Curtis's question. So, I mean, you have made your living, and especially in the 80s, made your living making the software. Well, the software is out there now, and I am one of many people who have copies of it. So what would you like to say to the people who right now who have Zaxxon and all these things here? Would you prefer that we are not using them at the moment, or?
Okay, here's the thing. It goes along with what I was saying earlier. I have to defend my copyright. If I don't know about it, I can't do anything about it. But if I find out about it, I have to do something about it. So don't put it up on a public website. Do not put it out on places that I see. If I do, I will have to have a legal letter put together and do a cease and desist.
Okay, and you're talking about putting out the software itself for distribution. What about somebody just like, because I have got many YouTube videos playing your games. I mean, is that an acceptable form of, is that still technically copyright or?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. My opinion is that is not kind of copyright, but there are video game manufacturers out there that do it. By the way, be very careful when you open up software in there. When you look at the EULA, that's, my God, 25 pages long,
right?
But both sides. In there, they'll state things like, you're not allowed to review the software. You are not allowed to put a video of the software up anywhere.
Wow.
Be careful when you look at those things, because they are legally binding. So if you are somebody that's doing reviews on software, please go through the right channels. Get the review copies. Make sure you follow all their guidelines on review. Otherwise, you could be opening yourself up to a major law case.
Interesting.
Now, as far as the games that were done back in the days of the CoCo, well, as far as I'm concerned, the video image of you playing the game is yours, and that's what you're creating. Just don't reuse it for your own profit, in the sense of where you're going out there and it's kind of like the same thing as somebody that's doing rap and you take samples from music. You want to limit what you're doing so that what you're doing is you're creating new content. It doesn't sound like you're just rehashing old content.
Right. I think we've asked this question to a few other people too about, would you be open to the idea, like if somebody just wanted to send you an anonymous PayPal payment as either a thank you gift or as kind of like their own personal guilt retribution for what they did get for free in the past? It seems like there needs to be like a website for everybody who's gotten free software, who now is older and more responsible and has the money to to do the right thing, to say let's make a thank you gift to some of these artists that were robbed in the 70s and the 80s of all the piracy.
Boy, that's a little bit like, there's so many things that they've done to try and curve that in the industry. In the case of the music industry, when you buy a blank audio cassette, you're paying a royalty to all the artists. Well, let me rephrase that. You're paying a royalty to the recording industry. Same thing with blank videotapes. You're paying back to movie productions. You don't get those tapes completely for free. You're paying a little royalty back. But as far as me personally, as some sort of guilt payment, I just rather see you help somebody in society, whether it be a donation to the local humane society or help the children's organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs, or just do something to help the community. That's where I think it could probably help the best.
That's awesome.
If you feel a little guilty, help somebody. I'll be happy then. I'd be happy then. I could always use more money. We could always use more money. But the thing is, you set up something like that, it ends up really costing more than it is for the money to come in.
Gotcha. Cool. Very cool. Well, this talk I think turned out to be very cool. Very cool. I mean, I definitely don't want to take up all your time today, and we definitely want to save some of the other topics for a future discussion. So I think we covered a lot today, and definitely thanks for being here, Steve.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. And I don't know if anybody else who's here right now wants to chime in on anything, but we'll probably wind this down here in a couple of minutes. I don't know if Rick, if you wanted to say hi to Steve while you're here.
Well, hi to Steve. Yeah, I'm glad to hear from you again.
Yeah, it's been a long time. The last time was, I think, at a meeting with Electronic Arts, I think.
I remember that meeting, yes.
Not a fun one. Not a fun meeting. I mean, I was doing I did my best.
Yeah. It was fun at the time, but after that, not so much fun.
Yeah.
James Ross is asking, Steve, did you do anything on the Amiga or the Atari ST?
Let's see. What can I talk about? Amiga, no. There was some driver stuff that I did inside the Atari ST. Because you got to also remember, Atari ST and Amiga, they almost like, the companies kind of trade hands a little bit. You know, owners kind of, it was weird back then. So it's kind of hard to remember stuff. But in my life, there's been a lot of drivers because I know how software works. I know how hardware works. So I've kind of been in the middle of that. And so there's a lot of places where I've had my fingers that people just don't know.
Nah.
But you didn't do any actual game ports for those two systems?
While it's true that the CoCo, most of the time, I developed games and like that. A lot, and then also in past life, too, you know, for different game consoles and stuff like that. I've done video games and like that. But as far as a lot of the stuff I've done has been non-game. It has been more system level or driver level or operating system level type of stuff and like that. Actually, the last.
And yeah, was nice.
I'm trying to think. The last time I wrote a game was back in the 90s.
Wow.
Impressive.
And Nick was asking if you did any OS9 stuff, and I think you did. You helped with the high-res joystick interface driver, I believe.
Yeah, and I also wrote a bouncing ball in OS9.
And you did Color Computer Artist or something like that, wasn't that OS9?
Yep. Color Computer Artist was the thing. Color Computer Artist was a funny project. It did not come out the way it wanted. Way I wanted. I wanted to come up and do a much more advanced version of the Micro Painter. Yeah, Micro Painter. I want to do a much more advanced, basically starting and getting the direction of what Photoshop was. I wanted to do layers and a few other things like that. But no, they decided at Tandy they wanted a vector-based drawing program. And I hated doing the project. I have to admit to this day that's the one program, once I got it done, I never booted it up ever again.
Wow.
One project. It's just, I got it done to the specs. I never promoted it. I don't think I even put it on resumes. It was just like wrong project.
So that's one where you didn't have much creative input. It was basically, here's something we want you to do. Here's the contract. Go do it.
Well, actually, the contract was for something that was like basically a very advanced micropainter. But in the middle of it, Mark Siegel decided, no, I want a illustrator.
Okay.
I could have fought him on it. But it would have been a lot of work to fight him on the thing, so I didn't. So, and of course, the project never sold. I got dismal royalties on it because it just didn't sell. That's one project I should have done for cash up front.
Actually, that's an interesting question to ask you. Like, as far as contracts with Tandy, were they basically all the same, or was it quite different between projects?
It was different on projects. Usually, though, if a game was a outside license or something like it's Electronic Arts game or something, like when I did Rampage, that was an outside, that's coming from the outside as far as licensing like that. That is work for hire, and you get paid a lump sum. Now, you can get bonuses for things, and one of the things in there was a very healthy bonus for getting it done by a certain date. And they put the date in there thinking, well, we'll never have to pay that date. Well, the date was 35 days from the start of contract, and Rampage was done in 35 days.
Oh, cool. So they had incentives for doing things fast, obviously. Did they also have incentives, like if you hit certain sales figures through Radio Shack, that you got another bonus, or how did that work?
If you're doing a project work for hire like Rampage, no. Because what was going on is Electronic Arts was going to take the royalties. But Electronic Arts essentially was paying for the development of the project. Just Tandy had the developers. Now, in the case of something that I more or less created, like Ganabawana or Stellar Lifeline, those were royalty-based. And Megabug was also royalty-based because that was coming from inside Datasoft. And those created a tremendous amount of money.
Okay, so was that your preferred contract if you had the option?
Oh, yes. Oh, definitely. oh, yeah. I mean, it was not unusual for me to get a post-Christmas check of anywhere from, well, let's put it this way, definitely in the six figures and going up.
Oh, wow. Actually, that brings me to another question, because we've always been trying to figure out, like how many CoCos were sold, and there's no way to seem to be able to get that. But in your case, what was your best-selling game, and how many copies was that, if you know?
I can't really remember.
It was Zaxxon, obviously.
Well, Zaxxon did very well, and I don't have those direct figures on that. But the thing about what I'd like doing on the CoCo, besides, I generally did like the hardware. I loved the 6809. There was no better processor that was 8-bit at the time. The thing was, I considered it to be a very small pond, but I happened to be a big fish in that pond, and I could do very well. Where I had a lot of other people that were working on Commodore that I knew, and they were struggling they were producing great product, but they were struggling because there was just so many people out there producing for this big pond.
Interesting. So even though it was a bigger system, it was a more crowded market.
You got it. It was tough. And that's the reason why you needed labels like Electronic Arts to do it. In the beginning, Electronic Arts, while they did have a few of their own products, they were basically working as a fulfiller for other companies. So other companies would develop their game, and then Electronic Arts would actually go through and sell it. Sometimes you do your own marketing, or sometimes Electronic Arts would do the marketing. It depends on what the contract was set up as. So that's why Electronic Arts got so big so quickly.
Yeah, and I think it was the same situation with other ones like Broderbund and Activision and a few others too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Electronic Arts more or less set the model for the industry.
Okay. So was your best-selling game a CoCo game, or was your best-selling game in another platform?
In other platforms.
Okay.
After I left the CoCo and I started doing consoles, it was unusual for a cartridge to sell 5-6 million.
Wow.
And I'm assuming that's quite a bit higher than your highest-selling CoCo one?
Yeah, I'd have to say so. I mean, I know you guys are trying to figure out what the numbers were. I don't even know the exact numbers for what the CoCos were back then. And I would sit there and say, come on, guys, I'm developing for this thing. I have to know the numbers. And basically, I kind of get the answer of, no, you don't.
I remember when Nick interviewed Mark way back in the late 90s, I think Mark's thing was more than you would think. That was his answer.
Yeah. Well, Tandy never liked to publish their numbers because they didn't want competition coming into the market, and they definitely didn't want large third parties coming in at first. Later, they started realizing that they needed people like Activision to bring out the great titles for their system.
Yeah, actually, we had a discussion on that earlier, where how much the whole scene would have been different if Tandy had allowed third party right at the start, because everything was Tandy only at that point. They didn't even let you know that magazines existed.
Actually, I'm remembering something that you guys were asking about before was Zaxxon, and I think it was at Comdex where we did have the display. Now, I hadn't been at that particular Comdex show, but it was shortly after that I heard from, I'm going to say a name, I'm not sure if the name's correct, Barry Thompson?
From Tandy? Yep.
Yeah, from Tandy. His bosses were wandering the show, and they found Zaxxon playing there, and basically he got raked over the coals why Tandy didn't have that game in their stores. And it was basically Datasoft, since we were having to pay such a high royalty to Sega, just basically they didn't want to pay our price. They're used to getting the price so much cheaper. So eventually Datasoft and Tandy were able to work out a deal.
Yeah, and then they brought some other ones in, like Puyan, and was your Moon Shuttle, was that sold through Tandy, or was that just through Datasoft?
I can't remember because it was after I left Datasoft.
Okay.
The Puyan was being worked on while I was there, and Moon Shuttle was started about the time I left and completed after I was gone. Now, as you know, James Guerin, he got his name listed on some of the games and like that, but it was always James Guerin and I in the beginning that were working on the games. I was the lead developer on the game, writing most of the code, and James would write a little bit of his sound routine here or a little funny graphic routine there, and he would also help with drawing the graphics. Well, Datasoft at the time had a policy only one person's name could go on the game. So some of the games that I actually developed, his name went on. So, like, for example, Shooting Gallery has his name. But it was actually more my development than his, but I gave him I wanted him to have his name on some of the games. So that was the only way to do it.
I wonder whether they had that policy of only one. I mean, I remember the big stink between Atari and the reason Activision was ex-Atari programmers split off is because they weren't allowed to have any credit at all on games.
Inside there, I knew people that worked at Atari. The common statement is, you are no more important to this game than the guy that's putting it in the package on the assembly line.
Wow.
Wow.
That was their attitude. And this was after Bushnell had left, and it was basically Warner Brothers running the deal.
So they didn't have a full appreciation of what the most difficult part of the development process is.
Well, you got to remember, Warner Brothers, they deal with recording artists and actors and like that, and they're not going to have those creative people telling them, what's important or what's going on. So they're going to immediately shut that down. They don't want the programmers to become artists.
And actually, programming is an art. I mean, everybody can do the same thing, but they do it totally differently because it's almost free form.
Right.
So much flawed thinking during that time.
Yeah. Yeah, they're different companies are responsible for so many things in this industry, and it'd be interesting for somebody to actually write a book that's almost in chronological order about who did what when. Starting with, I think the cornerstone of all this has to be the Homebrew Computer Society that met in the mid-'70s, because in the meetings that I went to, there was a guy that would sit in the back of the room near the electrical outlet, and he'd always have something new that he brought in. And I still remember when Steve brought in this little machine he was working on based on this little 6502 he was given to at the local computer show. And it was an Apple I.
Yeah, that was Woz?
And that was Woz. And Steve Jobs was walking around listening to people. He wasn't much talking, but he was there listening to people. But you had people that created the Ethernet there, people that started Adobe. Cornerstone of all of our technology in the computer industry started at the Homebrew Computer Society. And at the time, I was still in high school, and my parents didn't know it. I'd be driving up from Los Angeles to Silicon Valley to go to those meetings. I'd skip out of school early, get there just in time as the meeting started, and I'd drive back all night.
That would have been a hell of an education.
Yeah.
It was. It was interesting to watch the different things go on. But everything, most of the stuff was based around the 8080 and the Altar 8800 systems. But then you started having the 6800 systems come out, and it was interesting to watch it all grow.
That would be a good book in and of itself, just to go through the meetings and what progressed and what became real products, or what inspired real projects. And
I don't know if that much actually got at the meetings, but one thing I will say is it was definitely a free flowing of ideas. Everybody wanted to help everybody. It was a free exchange of information. Even though most of these people during their day job, they're working on these big mainframes and they sign, contracts that they can't say anything to anybody. But here they were in an environment where everybody could talk about it and they could share stuff, and it was unlike work. It was a true hobby. And it really, that's what I think, that thought alone and how everybody is really what started the microcomputer industry, is because everybody was willing to share. Of course, once the big companies start getting involved, and of course then IBM made the PC, well, that kind of changed.
Yeah. But I mean, you were mentioning early things from before Adobe was formed, or Woz and Jobs, before they started Apple as a corporation type thing. Like all the seedlings of a lot of the technologies that are still around today, or inspirations for technology we still use today, all came from those meetings back in the 70s.
It was that, and also Xerox PARC up there. They were developing the first truly electronic office, or paperless office, and the guys back at corporate in New York didn't have a clue, because it was Xerox. Xerox makes their money copying papers. Here these guys are creating a paperless office. How are we going to make money?
Yeah, because
we can't sell copiers. We can't sell copiers.
Yeah, because they were developing like the GUI, they were developing the windowing systems, they were developing Ethernet and connectivity between machines, all kinds of things. And that's when Jobs kind of swept in there and went, holy crap, this is really good stuff. And then like HP corporate, like you said, didn't have a clue, and kind of signed away the farm there.
Well, one reason why corporate signed away the farm is they had stock in Apple.
Yeah, they did make money on the deal.
Yep. Yeah, so that was in there. But yeah, just I have to admit, for me, I feel myself fortunate that I lived in at least California, where I could go up to Northern California. I mean, we have this chain of stores out here that's migrated across the country now called Fry's Electronics. And could you imagine in the 80s walking into a store that has a banner outside that says, "Welcome High-Tech Professionals"? It was just like, I'm home. I walk in the store, it's like, this is candy. I mean, there's aisles of resistors, capacitors, and the latest in the sound equipment, and these different computer systems. And it's just like, oh my God, somebody looked inside my brain and said, what would be the perfect store for me? So every time I went up to San Jose, I had to make sure my car was as empty as possible, because I knew it was going to be filled with stuff from that store when I drove back home.
That reminds me of CoCo Fest.
Yeah. No, I feel fortunate that I started in this area. That's probably one of the things that helped me the most. In any case, we're at 2.5 hours, aren't we?
Yeah, no, that's great. But
it's shut up and quit asking you questions.
It is no, that's fine. Like I said, I'm enjoying being a fly on the wall just in this conversation. But can you imagine being a fly on the wall back when you had Jobs and Woz and everybody in the same room? It's just that was the time when literally things were being created that did not exist. We're literally changing the world. It was a whole nother revolution. Like the 60s had the free love movement. This was like the free tech movement, and the world was changed. And it's amazing hearing about it as a short story. It had to be absolutely amazing to actually be there,
Literally the start of an entire industry, and then all the spin-offs that have affected every other industry since based on that. And it all coalesced in that one area, that one time.
I do got two quick anecdotes along the lines there. I don't know how much people know. I am a Disney fan from all their intellectual properties. I used to be a cast member at Disneyland. I have some connections to Imagineering. I won't say any further than that. But there was an attraction at Disney's California Adventure called California Dreams. It was a story of California. And towards the end of the film, they kind of show these different scenes of California. They show the scene of a guy carrying this computer. He almost trips. And he goes to the back of the lecture hall, and he sets up his computer. And he's showing it off to people. And this one guy reaches in to kind of like, well, what's this? And he's pointing his finger down at that. And Woz slaps his hands and says, don't touch. I got goosebumps watching that scene because I exactly seen Woz do that back at the Homebrew Computer Society. It was just like, whoa, I saw this. And it's just like, so every time I would see that show, they don't have the show anymore, but every time I'd see that show, I just get goosebumps because I'm going, no, that was definitely a moment in time. They got that right.
Wow.
The other thing was, I had a lot to do with Zaxxon other than just writing the CoCo version. For us to get the rights to it, they had this game called Zaxxon that wasn't testing very well. And it was basically more of a space fantasy with pastel colors, and you were fighting a dragon at the end of the journey. And that's not the Zaxxon that you see. You see a Zaxxon that's got more Space Fortress blues and red colors and stuff like that instead of pastel colors. And that was part of my design suggestions to make this game more palatable to the American audience, because that was the design that came over from Japan. Matter of fact, if you kind of want to see what Zaxxon looked like originally, look for the game Zaxxon 2 or Super Zaxxon. They basically brought that one out later.
Right.
But these were my suggestions like that. And that's part of the reason why we got the rights to Zaxxon, because we made it profitable. Because back in those days, they didn't care about the money from us converting the game, because those arcade game manufacturers were just making so much money selling the games to arcades. I mean, you could go to a funeral home and find an arcade machine.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, they were really saturating the market with these things. They were making them like they couldn't believe. So that's the reason why Deosoft got is because of the little changes I did. Well, when I was at this thing called Electronica that they had put at Disney's California Adventure again, it was basically a celebration of the new Tron movie that came out. And they had Flynn's Arcade, and in there they had a Zaxxon machine. So I walk up to the machine, I start playing the game, and of course, I kind of know how the game works, and I'm playing it, and I'm getting a crowd around me because all these people are going, how is this person able to do this? And I even noticed there was a couple of supervisors wondering if I was cheating or something. And when I finally finished the game, I turned around and I did a little bit of Flynn from Tron, and I said, I wrote the program.
All in the fingers.
Yes. And they go, what? No, this is one of my games. I wrote this. And next thing I know, I'm signing autographs. Because what it was is this arcade that they put together had just opened, and you had all these Tron fanatics there and diehards from original video games, and they knew Zaxxon, they knew this stuff, and then actually to have somebody that wrote the program in their mix made their day.
Yeah, that is cool. The Zaxxon controller, that kind of trigger thing, is the same one that the Tron game had too. Or similar. The Tron game had something like a trigger. Like
it did have that, but they were a little bit different designs. The one that Bally ended up putting on the machine, which was based on the one from the movie, was a lot of plastic. It glowed, where the one that Zaxxon had was an all-metal trigger, so it would stand up to the rigors of the American arcade. The one that they had. The one that they had from Japan wouldn't last. They had already changed that.
When you were first describing Zaxxon, it actually almost sounded like Space Harrier, which is another Sega game that is dealing with a lot of pastel colors and dragons and stuff like that too. So definitely certain cultural differences that would influence some of the games.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. That's very cool. Well, yeah, we definitely, I can't wait for November or December or whenever it is when we get the full, official interview with you. But yeah, this is great. This has been a great talk. Yeah. So, we probably should start to wind down. So we'll give everybody again a chance. Anybody wants to wrap things up or anything you guys want to close or talk about or plant a seed for next week.
Well, we'll definitely get into Bill's coverage of building MAME on OS 10.
Yeah, on the Mac.
No problem there. I was actually happy to get preempted by Steve there. That was a very interesting talk, Steve. Thank you very much.
I still kind of feel bad for that.
Oh, don't.
Don't.
It's actually helped inspire me. Like, I'll be able to come up with some questions for November here, so we can kind of pre-send them to you. Like you said, you want to be prepared for it, so we'll give you a bunch of things that. I've got a ton of things I'd like to ask you even now, but I don't want to extend the interview today to like 5 hours. So,
very good,
very cool, very cool. Neil Blanchard's been a silent participant here for a few minutes. How are you, Neil? All the way from Canada, from the
I'm doing
Crew
great.
Podcast.
Nice to be here. Thanks for letting me in.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, we had Trump tear down the wall for a minute so you can get through.
Jeez.
Yeah, I was enjoying listening to Steve's story there. It's pretty interesting times back then.
Oh yeah. Anything you can tease for us and what we can expect in the June episode of the CoCo Crew Podcast, Neil?
Not right now.
Okay.
No.
As in, there's surprises, or you haven't done it yet?
It's in the works. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. I have submitted my my exhibitor application to Tandy Assembly. Maybe we'll pull up that one real quick here too. So, for those of you not aware, Tandy Assembly taking place this October. It's the first inaugural event of another retro vintage computing festival focused on Tandy computers. So, I went ahead and submitted my exhibitor situation here. Here's the current layout of that. I don't know. We're getting a lot of feedback right now from somebody. So Tandy Assembly, is there anything new that we can talk about Tandy Assembly, Neil, while we have you here too? Anything has changed right now? I'm looking at the current speaker lineup.
No, everything so far is the same. We're getting lots of people are registering though, which is great to see. Okay. And again, we're trying to welcome everybody. Doesn't matter what type of Tandy you like. We want to see it all there. Yeah. Well,
the CoCo Crew Podcast is one of the sponsors. Floppy Days Podcast, Trash Talkers. This is going to be cool. I'm looking forward to it because for those of us who go to CoCo Fest, we do talk about experiencing the CoCo Fest blues of having to wait an entire year to geek out again. And so now that we can do it twice a year, it does kind of ease the pain of those blues a little bit, And I'm sure we'll have more updates of this by the time we hear the next CoCo Crew podcast in this month sometime, because we're in June already, right?
Yeah, that's right. The end of the month it'll be released.
All right.
And we tried
episode 24.
24, that's right. Yeah, and we also, with the Tandy Assembly, we tried to spread it out from CoCo Fest as well, so it's not, too close.
Right.
This way it does help with the blues.
Right. It gives you a chance for your wallet to recover a little bit too, because if you had to pay for traveling to get there and all the money you spent. Oh, speaking of on the auction, do you guys know if you're going to have an auction yet at Tandy Assembly, or is it too soon to tell?
No, it's official. We're definitely going to have an auction. Yes.
Okay, that needs to be mentioned and probably put on the website. I don't remember seeing it there because when you look at the...
Yeah, that'll be mentioned very soon.
Okay, well that's good. So we have the scoop. We got the scoop. So is it a minimum no bid auction similar to CoCo Fest?
Yes. Yeah. Same setup.
Okay. Will we be able to rope Tony Pedraza into being our auctioneer, or are we going to have another?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Tony's going to make it. I mean, that'd be kind of cool if he did. We'd definitely like to see him there.
Yeah, that would be cool. Well, that's good to know. So because that is one of the fringe benefits, besides the camaraderie and seeing the projects and seeing the technology and hearing all the discussions. The other fringe benefit is like eBay on steroids, where you can get deals of a lifetime on rare items for pennies on the dollar, and what you would even pay on eBay prices. And if you're lucky enough not to have to ship them, that's even better. I've been to 2 CoCo Fests, and every time I'm there, I'm like, I wish I would drive, because to be able to pick up a CM8 monitor for $40 at this last CoCo Fest, you know what I mean? You have no idea what a value that is. And not being able to fit it in my suitcase is a major problem.
You just need a bigger suitcase, that's all.
Yeah, right. So I'm driving to Tandy Assembly. It's gonna be a road trip. So I'm driving with Michael Brandt. We're gonna meet him in Orlando, and it's like a 12-hour drive for us that we'll share. So if there are any bargains to be had, I'm looking forward to bringing a few items home this time.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you'll be able to get some larger items.
Yes. And I will be bringing my Sega Joypad adapter with my CoCo 3 and my Wyco controller, so I'll have Popstar Pilot available to play. We had talked about doing a Donkey Kong Remix high score challenge, so I'll have the computer set up where we can do that. So I'll have it's actually your CoCo 3, Neil, the one I got from eBay.
Oh,
I'll have your CoCo 3 at Tandy Assembly.
I was actually just thinking about that last week. I was wondering if you're still using it. That's great.
That's what I record on. That is my CoCo. That is my primary computer. Is the Neil Blanchard edition of the CoCo 3? Yeah.
Oh, that's.
So. Yeah,
or did you mean Neil Brookings?
Neil Brookings, too. Yeah. Well, that's his alter ego.
Yeah.
At least he's got one less than Drencore.
Yeah.
Shut up.
So if we're still recording, I just wanted to mention that I've got a new release of the MAME software for the Mac. It's SDL MAME. Right. I've posted on the mailing list. It should be up hopefully soon on Tim Linder's website, www.macmess.org.
Mm-hmm.
And it, unlike my earlier versions of MAME and Mess I released, I built my own front end in TCL. This one's not using the TCL front end. This one is using the SDL user interface that is now built into MAME, which I found to be fairly functional.
Okay. Just quick question: what version of this is this? The 186 or the 187?
The 187 is not released yet. This is it's slightly above 186 though, because what I did was I pulled from GitHub, and I have also applied a couple patches for a couple critical issues.
Okay.
And this one supports the Sound Speech Pack and the Master Game Card too?
Yes, it does. It supports all stuff that is currently in the main development thread. So
well, that's a great service you've provided us, Barry. Thank you.
I do them every once a year, or 2 years or so, periodically, when I see that there are either major improvements in the MESS or MAME code as far as emulated systems that are popular, or features that have been added, or when the code starts getting out of date for my previous release, I'll make a new release.
Well, that's great. That's great. A lot of discussions surrounding MAME has been going on these past couple of weeks. The speech sound cartridge emulation, I think, has opened a few eyes and ears to it, and there's still a lot of misinformation and misconceptions. So I think the more people can understand what MAME can currently do, it's a good thing to shed some light on it. You still may choose not to use it for a lot of reasons, but it's best to be informed with some of the latest information rather than outdated misinformation,
Yep. One of the things I found out that still MAME will not do is it will not run the 32K CoCo 3 cartridges. At least I've been able to figure out, the proper setting for it. It looks like it does not have a cartridge type and a setting for it. It should be normal pack. I don't think the banked 16K would be the correct setting for that. Would be for 16K banked cartridges. So I don't think, but in any case, I've tried to mount the 32K cartridges for the CoCo 3. They do not work on MAME, but they do work on VCC.
Okay. That's interesting. And so you're talking about those are CoCo 3 specific things that use the 32K cartridge, right?
Right. Yeah, it probably has to do with the memory mapping. The 32K cartridge, of course, needs to map a bank of memory of 16K starting at address 8000. Normal cartridges start mapping at C1000. So I think what's happening is, and the cartridges normally are in, the bank order is reversed. So the 16K bank in most standard cartridge formats for emulators, the 16K bank that starts at C1000 is first, and then it usually has the 8000 bank after that.
That is correct.
Yep. So I don't think MAME is mapping that correctly.
Okay.
I tried one of the 32K cartridges that also works in the Color Computer 1 and 2, on the Color Computer 1 and 2, and the cartridge worked there.
Okay.
And it also works in my CoCo Flash, so I know I've got a good image because it works on the real hardware.
Gotcha. Well, that's interesting. That it's like the things that we're finding now that we're quote unquote either breaking it with, or the bugs that we're finding are some kind of unique situations. But as they're being discovered, at least this is something that can be worked on. I hear David Ladd laughing in the background.
Do we know why Temple of Rom doesn't work with MAME?
Temple of Rom doesn't work with MAME? Interesting. Yeah, that's that's a smaller than 16K cartridge. It's 16K or less. Right. It should work.
Does that have anything to do with the bad way it was coded?
Be nice, guys.
Yeah, I don't know why.
That is interesting.
It was
I couldn't get it to work, and I had a report from somebody else, too.
I enjoy playing that on the real hardware, so thank you.
Okay. Well, you're welcome. Somebody might look into that. I'm kind of salty about that. It's kind of personal for me.
Yeah, right.
I understand. I'll be looking at the 32K. I'll be looking into the 32K bug, and while I'm looking into that, I'll post a bug about Temple of Rom, and I'll look into that too and see if I can figure out what's going on there.
Yeah. Where make sure that I really know what I'm talking about first. But yeah.
Now, I think you're right, Rick, because I think I've tried it before in MAME, not the latest version, but I think I've run into the same issue.
I will try it on the latest version that I've got with some. I've got one patch applied that's not even. Actually, two patches applied that aren't even in the dev tree yet to fix issues. One of them was to fix a crash when you're running the MAME without a system name, so it comes up as a menu with listing all of your systems. When you're running it in that mode, when you exited a CoCo emulation or an NES emulation, it would crash instead of going back to the menu. So there was a patch I applied, which isn't in the main code yet, to fix that. Because obviously that would be an issue with my program, which opens in the main menu and doesn't, so.
Well, here's something to try. Arkanoid is a 32K cartridge, but it has a CoCo 1.2 mode and a CoCo 3 mode. Now, can the main emulator run in CoCo 1.2 mode?
Yes, I actually tested. That was the one I used to test with.
Okay, did it work in the 1.2 mode?
It did.
What about the CoCo 3 mode?
No.
Okay. I think you're probably on the right route with the fact of how they get laid out when they're in 32-bit mode or 32K mode.
Yeah, I don't think it's mapping it correctly. So it's either mapping the it's either not mapping that upper bank, which should go really it's the lower bank at all, or it's mapping it improperly.
Yeah, that developing 32K cartridges were tough in the beginning, especially where the fact that I used all the 128 memory on, let's say, Super Pitfall. All that memory got used, and I actually had to emulate it on a 512 when I was developing. But the issue got into rearranging that stuff. So I had a little problem trying to get Super Pitfall working the first time on a ROM. We took several attempts at it, and then eventually we got it working. So I think it has to do with what you're saying with the MAME emulator and how it swaps the 216K banks with the 32K.
I'm almost certain that it has something to do with that, or either that or it has to do with a bit that you flip on to enable the 32K mode maybe is not emulated on the Gimme, on the MAME emulator.
Yeah.
Because there are very few things that use that other than the 32K cartridges.
Right.
So, it's related to that. So, anyway, I've got Steve, can I ask you a question? You mentioned that you were going to acquire the rights from Samsung for your cartridges and stuff in your software.
The thing is, I did acquire the rights. So when I informed Samsung that they would be responsible for tracking down piracy on these rights that they had licensed, they were more than happy to send the rights back to me.
So are you gonna put up something that's gonna have hopefully a not too expensive way of having a collection or individual games or stuff where we can send you PayPal payments for that, or are you gonna make some of them available like some other people have for the community, where you hold it under license, but the license is for user to use it.
I'll be thinking about in the next few months while I'm busy. My work is seasonal, and starting in November, what I'm working on now basically ends the season, though I do have some holdovers for Christmas that buy my stuff. But about November, things lighten up, and then I can start thinking about things more seriously, and we'll see. I mean, there's no way, even if I charge for it, I'm going to make money on this. So
I hear you.
Yeah. It's just the amount of time that might get involved in what I have in the way of source code that's still on floppy that works.
Right. Well, you don't necessarily, one of the options that some people have done, you don't necessarily have to support it. You could post it with a license and have somebody host it on a website and say, look, I can't support this. It's still under copyright to me, but you can download it for your personal use.
Well, see, then I've got to put it in public domain and where the software was originally copied. And it's my lawyers say otherwise.
Really? Because Westwood did Command and Conquer without placing it in public domain. They still hold the copyright on it. But when you download it, it gives you a disclaimer saying you're licensed to use this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Well, these are the same lawyers that had to defend about 5 years ago some copyrights I had, and it became an issue.
Well, that is a dilemma.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, you could charge $1 for it, or and say no support available, or 50 cents, or whatever. Just enough, whatever.
Don't lowball the man.
No. You got to make
charge
it so
a decent amount of money and make yourself, charge a decent amount of money and make yourself some cash. Certainly deserve.
And then what's going to happen is that's going to get pirated, and I don't want to start the piracy thing because that hurts me more than making no money on it.
Yeah, it sounds like a slippery slope.
Exactly. It's just I got to do it right. Yeah. And I've got to make the lawyers happy, and I got to make it so it doesn't affect my ability to control my future software and hardware.
Well, we don't want that being impacted, and
bigger picture.
Exactly.
All right.
hopefully you've got some decent lawyers that are smart enough to find a solution, because I know that one is out there somewhere.
Well, let's put it this way. I married a lawyer too.
So hopefully you get a discount at least, right?
But she does government law. But I'll tell you one thing. You do something in regards to government related, you don't want to be against her. You do not. Oh.
All right. Well, we hope that maybe we'll hear something about this in the next few months or so. I mean, it's been this long that the rights have been out there in limbo. And, I mean, if it takes 6 months or a year, it'd still be a great announcement when it comes. So,
roger that. All right. Well, how about we wrap up the talk, and we'll save some for next week. We'll put a pin in this, and we'll save it for next week because we might run out of things to talk about between now and then. Not likely, right? So,
not likely.
Barry, thank you for joining us, and thanks for that update on MAME for the Mac OS. Mark, thanks for being here. David Ladd, Curtis Boyle, Neil Blanchard, thanks for stopping by. Rick Adams, always a pleasure. Rick, you want to give us any, I know you've updated us briefly, but anything else you'd like to throw in about bomb threat before we go?
Oh, nothing really. I'm pretty close to done. Of course, with every software project, there has to be a point where you shoot the developers and ship the product. So it may never come out.
NSA is now making a backup copy of this broadcast.
Yeah. Note to self, do not lose floppy in basement.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, I have lots of backups now.
That's good.
That's good.
So we're pretty close to done.
So once bomb threat's done, then you're going to find the original, right?
That thought has occurred to me on more than one occasion. Yes.
Irony can be pretty ironic sometimes. So, yeah.
Indeed it can.
Do you have hardware to read it if you find it?
No, I don't. But, I'll just have to go to the next, CoCo Fest, and it'll be there.
Exactly.
I did it. I did, amongst other things I've done data recovery. And I was able to read the ADOS-1 for Art Fletcher, who was the author of that particular wonderful piece of software. He sent me he mailed me the floppy, which he wanted his original floppy back, so I mailed it back to him when I was done. And I was able to put that in my drive, and after several rigorous attempts, I was able to read it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, the Shanghai discs that I found, I could read them no problem. So I probably won't have any trouble with that either, if assuming I find it, which is not a sure thing.
Right.
Well, if you want to take me up, if you want to mail it to me, I can mail it to me, and I'll mail it back. And
you gotta find it first.
Exactly. Exactly.
I would like to have the problem of figuring out exactly what I was going to do with that. Yeah.
Right.
That would be a problem I'd love to have.
Exactly. Well, Rick, thanks for joining us. I know you're on vacation. Thanks for stopping.
You bet.
Nick, thanks for being here, and thanks for showing us a preview of another game that maybe we'll see from you in the future. And Bill Noble as well, and especially thank you, Steve Bjork, for the trip down memory lane and all the really cool stories you shared with us. Definitely appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up CoCo Talk, and let me just also real quick too. We can't forget our audience. We must say hi to the people who have been watching us painfully this entire time, right? So, Rudy Kazuti has been here, James Ross has been here, Wayne Campbell has been here, Ricky DeRocher has been here. My daughter stopped in, Megan, for a minute. Sixie was here. Hey, Sixie. Grant Leedy was here. Ghost Rider stopped by from Australia, and Barry Marks came by as well, and Michael Brandt was in the call, and Glenn Hewlett was here. Glenn was on the call earlier, and he's been in the chat. Ed Snyder popped in for a minute. So yeah, I want to thank everybody who also at home watched the talk as well. We certainly appreciate it. And we look forward to next week. We look forward to more things to talk about in the world of color computer. And thank you all. And we'll see you next time.
Later, all.
Long live CoCo, everybody.
Bye.